My friends, my thinkers, my gamers, happiest of Fridays to you all. Welcome to Tales of Praxis. Delighted that you would choose to kick off your weekend of gaming and narrative adventure sitting in on this stream. I'm your host, Aaron Suduko, the founder of With a Terrible Fate. If you're just discovering us, withaterriblefate.com is your premier online publication home for everything to do with studying, analyzing, and celebrating the storytelling of your favorite narrative medium, which, if you're here, hopefully, is video games. And Tales of Praxis is a series of streams and articles I've been running for the publication for the past half a year or so, ever since Tales of Symphonia got remastered, and I found myself thinking about the amazing, indelible role that Bandai Namco's Tales games have had on my development, my experience of stories and video games, and philosophy, really, and how I think about the world ever since I was a kid, and really discovered gaming as a storytelling medium through Tales of Symphonia. So we've done a lot of good streaming since then. We kicked things off with the Terrible Fates' first ever streaming adventure, working through Tales of Symphonia, followed by Dawn of the New World, followed by Zestiria, followed by Alicia's story, and now we are in the beginning of the third act of Tales of Berseria, with the goal of working through all of the games in the Tales series in terms of my playing through them, streaming some, or perhaps even most of them, and eventually publishing works analyzing all of them in one way or another. I've also played through, off the stream, but as part of the Tales of Praxis series, let's see, Destiny and Tales of the Abyss and Tales of Vesperia, and a little game called Tales of Arise, which some of you may or may not be familiar with. And I have a confession, actually, as we ease into things on this Friday stream. If you were to rewind time a couple hours, you would have seen Aaron running around like a chicken with his head cut off all across town trying to find a Santa hat out of season, because I got this great idea in my head for a bit where I was thinking, how great would it be to come on the stream with a Santa hat and act as if Christmas came really early, because it did, as far as I'm concerned, with that amazing announcement of Tales of Arise's DLC, which no one was expecting, really, Beyond the Dawn. At least here in the middle of Colorado, turns out you can't really find a Santa hat out of season. So if I'd had more than a day between the announcement and the stream, I would have ordered one. But who knows? Maybe I'll reuse that joke once the DLC actually launches in November. Either way, I'm delighted. It does indeed feel as if Christmas came early. And I'm excited to ease into things with some conversation about that, some conversation about Berseria, and then we've got the beginning of our adventure diving deep into the third act of Berseria at long last after that. Pottery, welcome back, my friend. Yes. I did. You would be the last person to be surprised. I did put together a few thoughts on the DLC. I watched the trailer once or twice. I was joking with Dan because it was actually he who told me about it, because I didn't watch the State of Play live. And he said, I kind of feel like we willed it into existence with our presentation at PAX West, since it's so long after the game has come out. So, of course, I'm delighted. I'm kind of jokingly shaking my fist at Bandai Namco, complaining, oh, I've spent all this time on the series reading your work. Don't interrupt all of my interpretations of your work by producing new work that I wasn't prepared for. But, of course, it is the happiest of surprises. I'll be playing it right away. I imagine, since it's the first piece of properly new Tales content in a while, and it's coming out while we're doing Tales of Praxis, it'll also be the perfect kind of thing to stream, but we can cross that bridge when we come to it. It won't be coming out until November 9th, so we have some time to dwell on that as well. For those who maybe just heard about the announcement and haven't looked into it too much, or are playing catch up here on Tales of Praxis, I'm going to post in the chat. This is a great write-up that was done for PlayStation's blog by one of the general producers of the DLC from Bandai Namco, Yusuke Tomizawa. So I strongly encourage you to check that out. He has some really interesting thoughts on the game and also the DLC and its development cycle, and a few teasers of what to expect. And of course, the trailer is there as well. So check that out. I have a few thoughts on that and the trailer. Granted, we haven't played through Tales of Arise on the stream, but like I said, it was one that I played through very, very, very recently for the sake of doing my interpretation of it for the lecture we gave at PAX West, which is available online. It's probably what I'm going to be writing up next after my study of Tales of Vesperia and Destiny as well for people who want to check it out. So for the sake of Tales of Praxis and easing into the Friday night, I'm going to just give a spoiler warning for Tales of Arise in the first place. I'm going to share some of my thoughts. I'm sure we'll have plenty to speculate on and think about both over the course of this stream and then in the weeks to come. But yes, this is one of my favorite things about loving the literature of video games so much, because it's so serious and there's plenty to unpack, as we do all the time on the stream and on the website. But also it's that kind of magic especially when there's a new announcement that you hadn't been expecting and you're totally blindsided by it, like this, or similarly with Future Redeemed for Xenoblade Chronicles a few months ago. You get all of the giddiness that you got when you discovered a new game for the first time when you were 8 years old. That's my experience, at least. So I hope it still holds that joy for you as well. I know. It's like they heard you too, Pottery. I got a feeling someone at Bandai Namco is paying attention to us. I joke, but who knows? When all is said and done and we really do work through all of the games, I am pretty confident at that point, at least someone will have noticed from the company. But we'll see how that goes. Yeah, if ever there were a reason, that's a good one. So as you do go back and replay it, tell me what you're thinking of that. Here are some of my thoughts, because of course I took the time to dwell on it because I was so excited. And this is how excited I am. If I haven't mentioned this on the stream before, I will almost never watch trailers or look at any kind of press discussing games that I know I'm going to play, because I am so against spoiler warnings. I gave a whole lecture with Dan a few years ago at PAX South in Texas about how I really feel as though having content of a game spoiled for you beforehand materially changes your experience of the story and the way in which you engage it. And therefore, because games are interactive, it actually changes the content of the story in your playthrough of it. Which is something that I don't love. Although it's interesting because as the medium continues to evolve, companies seem to be aware of the spoiler cultures now, and sometimes they play with announcements or what they say the game is going to be about versus what it's actually about in interesting ways. So at this point, for me, it's more of a personal preference than anything. But I was so excited about this that I definitely wanted to sit down and watch the trailer a few times. So I have some vivid notes from that. Yeah, 100% Pottery. It seems like, and unsurprising from Bandai Namco, to really make the DLC something special, because of course the base games are oftentimes all about New Game Plus and carrying so much over. So it's interesting, right? Because one of the things that I want to talk about in a moment is what got me thinking between this DLC and Tales of Symphonia: Dawn of the New World. And you may or may not remember, Dawn of the New World was actually a very similar way, where back in the day when you had the version on the Wii, you could pop in a memory card from your GameCube with clear data from Tales of Symphonia, and it wouldn't carry everything over, but it would acknowledge that, and it would give you certain buffs and I think an herb kit or something at the start of the game. So it was nice to have that kind of recognition of your journey without predicating your entire next journey upon it, which also felt very true to the theming and story of Dawn of the New World. So I think it's cool that they're going in a similar direction with this. They talked, well, I should say, Yusuke Tomizawa talks in that article about the idea that what we're going to be seeing in Beyond the Dawn is a new sized sort of expansion for the Tales series, which is really exciting. But I think it's also worth noting, and they haven't talked as much about this, that it's an interesting case for me, because we've seen what expansions to the Tales series look like on either side of the size equation relative to what we're going to be getting in Beyond the Dawn. So they've said Beyond the Dawn is probably about 20 hours, so a good chunk, healthy for a DLC, but shorter than a game. But remember, in the Tales series in particular, we've seen what full game-like expansions of worlds look like that aren't exactly sequels. That's what we've talked to death, for instance, in Dawn of the New World. That's even, in fact, what we're doing now with Tales of Berseria, which is a kind of follow-up to Zisteria, but also not quite a sequel, or not quite a direct prequel in the sense of just adding more continuity to the world. It's doing something a little bit different. You could even think about Tales of Symphonia in that light relative to Tales of Fantasia, because Tales of Fantasia came out first, and they have continuity between their worlds as well. So that's on one side of the size spectrum. And then on the other side, we have the deliberately bite-sized DLC of something like Alicia's Story, which we also had the benefit of playing through together on the stream. And not only was that a very short DLC, but it was something that was self-consciously short, with the characters talking all the time about, man, if only we had more time with Alicia, we could give her a more human cadence to this journey of insight that she has to go on, but we don't. So it's going to have to be something different. And that game ended up feeling much more like a coda, reinforcing and highlighting certain aspects of the base story in a way that gave you a new look into it, but didn't really expand things and go in a different direction in the way that something like Dawn of the New World might. So it's interesting, since we have those two kind of pulls to consider as reference points, what this new DLC Beyond the Dawn is going to look like. And that's a big part of what I'm speculating about and interested in as we go further into this. I wonder too, just given that we're having another Dawn in the Tale series, how much its philosophy will be similar to and different than Dawn of the New World, because there are, even beyond the extension of the world, some interesting similarities there. We've seen in Tales of Symphonia, right, like Tales of Arise, it ends with the unification of two worlds, and then Dawn of the New World deals with the aftermath of what does the world really look like when it's brought back together, and you have to deal with the aftermath and the real business of living and getting people who don't necessarily understand each other and maybe even have prejudices against one another to get along and cohabit the world, and gives us portraits of things like the Silveranti Liberation Front to show how that can go awry, which I think is interesting. But it also has me wondering, given that a lot of this series, Tales of Praxis, is thinking about the language of the Tales games and also how they can strike different notes despite how similar they are. I wonder how being in Tales of Arise's world, especially if we compare and contrast it with Tales of Symphonia, is going to highlight different aspects of that or take it in different directions. For instance, right, unlike Lloyd and the way that he brings the two worlds together at the end of Tales of Symphonia, you might or may not remember, but at the end of Tales of Arise, when Alphen unifies finally Dana with Rena, he does it in this really, what I would say, and I think I say in the lecture, spiritually conscious way, where the whole final thrust of what he's trying to do is, you might say, similar to Lloyd in the sense of not wanting to sacrifice anyone, but also different, because instead of doing something like taking the eternal sword and wishing the worlds back together and just undoing Mythos's work, he actually calls upon basically the sentience and individual wills of every living being on Dana to support him in a kind of Okami-style way. If you ever played through Okami, something similar happens in the end there, in order to then aggregate the great spirit of Dana in support of this world unification and acknowledge the great spirit of Rena, this thing that has been antagonized for parts of the game, as actually like a genuine expression of the cosmic desire for things to be better than they are. And so bring the worlds together with a kind of recognition and tacit acknowledgement of everyone in the worlds already. It would be almost like something we don't get in Tales of Symphonia if Lloyd somehow called on the individual spirits of everyone in Silverant and Tetheala before unifying the worlds. But of course we don't get that, which I think to me is part of what makes it believable in Dawn of the New World, that these people who didn't really ask for their worlds to come together are immediately at odds with each other and grappling with, you know, what it means to cohabitate with people with whom you putatively have nothing in common. But since we've gone in a different direction at the end of Tales of Arise, where it seems like these people have reason over the course of the story to have overcome a lot of their prejudices already, I do find myself wondering, as we look forward to this DLC that's going to be taking place a year after the conclusion of the story, is it going to dwell on those same themes of what it takes to overcome prejudices when new people show up in your world? I feel like it would almost be disingenuous if it took the same tack as Dawn of the New World. And I also know enough about the Tales games to trust that they're going to do whatever is authentic to that world. So it makes me feel like they'll be starting from a different place and answering different questions than the kind of blatant discrimination and nationalistic rhetoric that we get in something like Dawn of the New World. And so I'm really, really interested, especially since we have that contrast class of a different Dawn of a New World, to see where it is that they will start and what it is that they want to consider. Yeah, well, let's get into a little bit more of what it seems like they're forecasting with the actual DLC, because you're right, Pottery. I mean, it definitely seems like they're thinking about discrimination still. Discrimination is such a broad theme, right? And Symphonia also, as we both know, has a very specific language for what discrimination means in the world and how characters engage with it. And so I think it's going to be pretty easy for them to dwell on things that, even if it seems similar, touches different notes and expresses different things. To wit, let's talk about Nazamil for a moment, which I believe is how you pronounce her name. I only watched the trailer about 5 times, but I'm sure after we've played the DLC to death, it will be ingrained in my head like Alphen and Shion and everyone else's names from Tales of Arise. There's I know I'm not even going to say there's speculation about who her parents are at this point. I will go one step further, which is to say, if you read that article I posted, Bandai Namco is explicitly inviting everyone to speculate about every aspect of the trailer, including Nazamil's heritage. So I don't feel badly in speculating about it. I was actually talking to Dan earlier today and complaining because I said, man, I was enjoying kind of playing around with the idea that maybe she was Almadria's kid and there was going to be a kind of mother-daughter thing of the sort that we've been studying in Tales of Berseria. But then I watched the trailer and Alphen explicitly says that her dad was a Renan Lord. So that kind of blows that out of the water right away, which is a little disappointing. But in light of that especially, I usually don't speculate, but it's too fun and appropriate in this case. So I'll put my flag in the ground and say, I think it seems pretty evident based on the way they've represented the trailer and also the themes that are left to dwell on at the end of Tales of Arise and what they do and don't leave resolved, that Nazamil is Volron's kid, with a I would imagine with a Danon consort or mother, although Volron was also the sovereign and a Danon like Alphen, so it'd be interesting if the mother was the Renan. I feel like they have enough room to play with pushing that in either direction in terms of what they want her heritage to be. But they kind of even call out this parallel in the article that I was talking about. But the great quote of Nazamil's from the trailer is, "The truth is that people will always doubt, hate, and reject," which is almost line for line what Volron says in his final confrontation with Alphen when he seizes the Renis Alma and annihilates himself. I went back to watch it, and he says, and get ready for another great call out to Dawn of the New World, which is obvious, but all the more obvious because it's in my head. He says, "You wish to save this world, to turn your selfish dreams into reality. If you choose to walk that path, you choose a path of betrayal, despair, and corruption. And in the darkness at the end, I'll be waiting for you." So Volron did have a promise that he would persist in one way or another, which to me, as much as anything, is a reason why there'd be so much payoff for continuing his lineage in the DLC, but also to, at the advent of the new world, to call out this idea of betrayal, despair, and corruption being seeded in the new world strikes me as the perfect kind of thematic mirror to the doubt, hate, and rejection that Nazamil calls out in the trailer. I think one thing that was also interesting, and this is where like my speculation brain really starts to go out of control, so I'll reel it in, but I will just say, as I was thinking back on it, especially since Tales of Arise is so fresh in my mind, one thing that I thought might be interesting from a lore perspective to extend our experience of the world and of Volron is it struck me that they totally have the room in the story to have this idea of the ultimate conceit of what's going on in the world is the great astral spirit of Rena, this aggregate sentience of the dark astral energy on Rena, is recognizing that the world is some way other than it should be, and so it's trying to subsume Dana and bring everything back together. And the way for it to do that is to suck up all of Dana's astral energy, and the kind of rationalistic methods that the Helganquil and then ultimately the Renans devise in order to do this is this kind of lock and key mechanism of this sovereign, a Danon who has the ability to manipulate Danon astral energy, and this maiden who's able to basically temper his control of the astral energy so that he doesn't go out of control with it in the way that Alphen himself frenzies during the ceremony, the first time that they attempt to fuse the planets using the Renus Alma. So I thought, man, wouldn't it be interesting if there were kind of a secondary plan, like a plan B or a failsafe, with the idea of instead having a sovereign and maiden as two individuals, with everything that could go wrong with two different individuals who don't know anything about what the plan is really about, coming together to facilitate this. If instead they tried to fuse those roles through the child of a sovereign and a maiden. And then not only to have that kind of being who would be a singular object for executing the plan of the great astral spirit of Rena, but also then to have that kind of being as a really interesting character study of just like what a painfully warped psyche that would entail, and how deeply someone like that with that heritage could misunderstand like the value and praxis of what it means for different cultures or even different planets to coexist. That strikes me as the kind of flavor that they could be striking with Nazamil already, based on the way that she's represented in the trailer, which got me excited. And you will note, if you've played Tales of Arise recently and go deep into the lore and all of the text, or if you have me here, a crazy person that I am, to call out actual screenshots for you, when you go to Lenegus and you enter the top secret area where all of the researchers actually work on the Sovereign project, you get all of these great details about basically their lab notes. And so you can learn different things about not just the project and roles like Sovereign and Maiden, but also the history of this project. And when they talk about Volron as the second successful Sovereign after Alphen, they say that, at first they say this guy's so crazy, he seems to be a megalomaniac, totally uncontrollable. We should just abandon and dispose of him. But then you get an addendum that's added to that research file saying, look, this is the first successful case in 300 years. Previously mentioned risk factors are now mitigated due to established control protocols. And then right after that, it continues, subject, which is to say Volron, is to be evaluated under the assumption that Plan 2 will proceed and will be dispatched to Dana under the guise of serving as the Lord, which we know is what happens with Volron. So the way that I read it the first time, and then when I replayed it, was the thought that this Plan 2 was basically what happens over the course of the story, with Alphen and Shion going through the world and inadvertently being led to reconstruct the Renus Alma, and then the great astral spirit of Rena is able to kind of go ahead with its plan without the same kind of need for the spirit channeling ceremony. But now with what we're seeing in the DLC, I find myself going back and stroking my beard like this and saying, oh, Plan 2. What if Plan 2 was a child and now we're going to see Plan 2 in real time in a world that doesn't really need her anymore and where she never fulfilled her purpose? That struck me as something that would be really interesting and would feel really Tales. So that's Aaron's tinfoil hat. I'll take the tinfoil hat off now. I feel like I had one more thing to say about it. Let me look through the rest of my notes. Yeah, another thing that she says, which is very much in keeping with this theme of, man, what would this kind of warped psyche, if it were meant to be sovereign and maiden alike, what would that entail? She says all differences must be erased. Once there are no differences, there will be, and then the line trails off in the trailer, which makes me think, hey, if you're thinking about someone who's designed with this purpose of just eradicating difference and subsuming the worlds into one entity, totally makes sense that she would have that kind of perspective on things. And it also strikes me as the exactly right kind of theme that, going all the way back to thinking about what would we be studying in a new world in the universe of Tales of Arise would be of the complete kind that you would expect in a follow-up to where Tales of Arise ends its story, because like I talk about in the lecture that I gave on it, the magic of the end of Tales of Arise is that everyone is able to really recognize each other on their own terms and affect this kind of spiritual coexistence where Alphen and Shion, even though they were originally brought together and made to be a good pair because of Shion's thorns and Alphen's mask, they're able to ultimately love and recognize each other as individuals regardless of contingent factors, which is what enables them to form a healthy and holistic union where yes, they're married, yes, they're able to spend their lives together, but not in a way that reduces them into a single entity. Just so the worlds are able to merge together, but not in a way where Rena is absorbing Diana, but in a way where both worlds seem to have agency and acknowledgement. So that seems like the good ending and the lesson of Arise, but it also seems like the kind of ending where, to me, it would be very natural to follow up with that, with a kind of misunderstanding or required further point of clarification from the merging of the worlds, saying that there's a need to accept one another without thereby reducing to one another in the way that I was just talking about. And so you could see how even someone who might seem to have the right mindset, like Nazamil, in terms of eliminating differences and bringing people together, is kind of missing the point by saying that the problem is differences as opposed to the problem being a failure to recognize and acknowledge everyone for who they are, which are very tonally different things as we learn across the course of Tales of Arise. Also cool, this is less tinfoil hat lore thinking, but especially if we go down this road thinking about Nazamil, I'm really excited about it because I found myself thinking, I was quietly hoping when they said Tales of Arise DLC that it would be just like a slice of life simulator after Alphen and Shion got married and you could just cook and things like that, because I felt like that would be really wholesome and empowering given like the lessons and the outcome of Tales of Arise. But since that doesn't seem to quite be the case yet, absent that, I find myself thinking, it would be so cool for Alphen and Shion to basically be like parents to this kind of misguided kid Nazamil, especially if she ends up being Volron's kid, and kind of being able to re-educate her and show her how to reconfigure her philosophy and approach to the world in a healthier way. And how cool as a model to see what it would look like for those heroes to direct their insights to the next generation, someone who carries both Danon and Ren in blood. And of course, that could also end up being an easy symbol for what Alphen and Shion's own child, and by extension, the whole next generation of the world would look like. So that's the tip of the iceberg, which is the great thing about Tales games and Tales content. Those are my thoughts. I'm sure we're going to have many more. I'm excited to chat with them over the course of this stream and beyond. But yes, to end where I began, I don't have a Santa hat to say that Christmas came early, but I have a glass of coffee because it's been a long day. I've been excited about this, and I'm thinking I might work on the Vesperia and Destiny article after this. So Bandai Namco, cheers to you. Thank you for continuing to make amazing content. I can't wait to see whatever direction you end up taking this in. Pottery, I would be interested in your thoughts on Volron after you go through it as well. I think it's one of those cases for me where being able to hold the whole story in my head, as one is able to do on any second playthrough of a Tales game, really snapped into focus what I think he's all about, which is what I talk about in the lecture. But you're right. I think he's a certain cast of villain for me where, since he just kind of shows up sporadically through the story, and so much of the story on your first playthrough is trying to figure out and keep track of the mystery of how the world works and what the world wants, it's very hard to localize the message of his character and what he's actually representing. Second time around, I don't think it's so hard. So I'd be really interested in what you think when you do go back to it. We'll have plenty to talk about. I have no doubt about that. I will give a quick update on the Destiny Vesperia article, which is to say it is fully outlined. I have some more like signposts for myself in terms of what I want to include in each section, but the overall sections are laid out in a way that makes sense and is illuminating to me, which is already feeling great. So the next step, of course, is to make it illuminating and insightful to everyone else. But I'm excited to dig into the writing this weekend. I think it's going to be really fun. I won't spoil the whole title, but I'll say that part of it, which speaks to the focus of the article and just rolls off the tongue, is Dimlos and Dane Nomos. So I'm excited to continue to share updates with you about that, especially you, Padre, for all your love of Vesperia. I know we'll have so much to talk about with that. Most of this weekend we'll probably be writing and working on that. The study is going to be organized around the acts of the games in a way that I think will hopefully be illuminating in terms of what I think is going on in each game, but also more important to the study, what's going on similarly and differently between them in a way that sums to insights that you wouldn't see from either one individually. So we're going to be looking at basically what the protagonists are struggling with in terms of their principles of action, what it is that's holding them back, how they're able to grow, and why at the end of each act that growth is insufficient and needs to be further developed by what the following act answers it with, which I think is nice because when you break down how Destiny and Vesperia answer those questions, it's pretty complementary all the way through. It's also a nice way in terms of, speaking of different ways to use a villain and different antagonist types in games, it's a nice way, I think, to schematize the antagonist styles that they both use, because I think that's a constant across the games. And once you see it in this way, it can be easier to see how they're playing with complementary themes. And I think, two hopes that I think are realistic ones to get out with this study. First, we've talked on the stream before about how I think for many people, Vesperia's third act is a little bit of a question mark, where whether you love it or hate it, it seems like something that comes a little bit out of left field relative to everything that happens before that in the story with Alexei and all of his machinations. Something similar, I think, could be said about the third act of Tales of Destiny, not in the sense that it comes out of left field so much, but that maybe a better way to phrase it is that it feels like a hat on a hat. It feels kind of forced or unwarranted in a way that is unnatural relative to the rest of the story. And I think that reading them, and especially seeing that weirdness side by side, can actually help us to relieve the puzzle of where that weirdness comes from. Because when we see them as complementary sides of the same coin, we can also see how they're natural complementary outcomes of wrestling with two senses in which the past and the history of the world can inhibit our ability to act of our own volition and on our own principles of action, which is kind of the closest I can get right now without too many spoilers to articulating what the heart of the study is going to be about. The second thing I'm hoping for, which I think is going to be all the more fun for someone like me, is, we spent so much time on the stream thinking about our different readings of these games and how to adjudicate them with one another. This is one of my favorite studies to date on specifically the Praxis side of Tales of Praxis, because I think it goes some pretty strong distance from interpreting the games to then applying that to how we think about the games and giving us some useful lessons for thinking about how it is that we think and talk about our playthroughs with the games and how we can put them into productive conversation with one another, which honestly are sorts of analytical thoughts that I wouldn't even have brought myself to consider were it not for the conversations that we were having on the stream up until now. So it's all connected. The stream will definitely get a big shout out in the acknowledgements. And hopefully that's something that you'll be seeing at some point this coming week. So stay tuned. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah, pottery, we can talk about that. I think I know that's intentional, because it's not just that they're both sovereigns, but actually, as I was rewatching the final fight between Alphen and Volron, after I watched the trailer, one thing that I forgot is there's a ton of dialogue during that fight. It's a great fight. And Volron actually acknowledges, like, in the final moments of the battle with Alphen, like, Volron himself is delightfully overwhelmed by how similar they actually end up being. So it's a surprising contrast that I think the game wants you to think about, where they do seem so similar and yet they end up on opposite sides of how they approach the same issue, even though up until like the final minutes of the game, they were putatively going after the same thing in terms of defeating the great astral spirit of Rena. And so thinking about how they come to diverge and what that says about their divergent philosophies of how to conduct themselves in the world and even how they think about the world, I think is a really illuminating and fun exercise. So that's something that I will definitely dwell on when I write up my my lecture notes, so to speak, as well. Okay. I think that's all of the non-Berseria Tales stuff to ease our way into the evening. There was a lot. And I think if ever there were a night to talk about all of that, it's on the night celebrating the announcement of a new DLC. So cheers to that. Let's vanish back into Berseria now. If I can. Where's the feed? Son of a bitch. My video capture card just decides not to work sometimes. Well, bear with me for a moment. And I will try to resuscitate the game. And then we will dive into Act 3 together here, which will be excellent. I wish I were better at vamping during this, but I would just ask questions like, so where's everyone from? How's everyone's night been going? There we go. All right. That wasn't so hard to bring back. All right, we are back. Back in action. It was easier than I thought it might be. I swear, every time I start getting into it, OBS has weird surprise issues. So thank you for bearing with me. Good. Now you'll see why I needed the cutaway intro conversation scene in OBS too, because as much as I love jumping right into the game, having this kind of manic, climactic music playing while we're getting all excited about Tales of Arise would maybe not be the exactly right tone, but it is for jumping back into Act 3. So let's situate ourselves in Berseria. So excited to be on the third act. I was kind of delighted that the second act went on for as long as it did, because I really felt like, I don't know if it was a factor of just the slow pace at which we went through it, but there was a lot there. And I think perhaps part of it was that there were so many small, intimate moments and character beats, which is maybe not what one expects, especially from the way this game kicks off, where it's very violent and brooding and in some ways larger than life. But then it really slows down and takes a more traditional Tales character heavy approach to the way you explore and learn about the world. So that pacing was very fun to experience. And now it's fun to be falling into Act 3, where everything, as you can tell by the music, will surely come to a head in the way that it usually does. Thoughts to situate ourselves here. We talked at the very end of the last stream about this question of how does Velvet relate to the rest of the party? And excuse me while I mute my PlayStation controller. Technical issues abound on this stream. The universe knows it's Friday, I guess, and is kicking back. So we were talking about the way in which the different, you might call them main characters, you might call them perspective characters, characters such as Velvet and Lloyd and Luke, they have different relationships with their parties based on what kind of story it is, how they experience the world, what it ends up being about. All the different ways in which stories can be told. And so I was talking with Grail at the end of last stream, because Grail had suggested way earlier in our adventures through Berseria this idea that every character reflects one aspect of Velvet's personality or another. And something that I raised to think about, especially as we get into the third act, was this idea that it seems more and more that the game's overall plot and conflict is architected around Velvet coming to terms with her past trauma, where in the first act, she had kept herself alive by thinking that she would get revenge on Artorias, and that would give a meaning to her life and her imprisonment and everything. And then, of course, she fails to realize that revenge and has to pick herself back up and figure out whatever the hell she's going to do next, and another reason for living in the event that she doesn't get her revenge. And then on the last stream, as we rounded the end of the second act, she had this crisis that she's still working through when she realized it wasn't really about Artorias at all. It was more about her figuring out how to cope both with the death of her brother, Laphicet, and her role with it and her implicit guilt in that. So it seems to be very much structured around her own personal journey in terms of what's motivating us to continue through this world and the plot. And so it occurred to me, well, since Velvet is still working things out, it's interesting to notice that a lot of these other characters seem to have much more settled senses in which they have come to terms with their own past, where, you know, we have Aizen, who has already basically accepted that he needs to separate himself from Edna in order to spare her from the Reaper's curse. We have Rokuro, who seems to, at least for the moment, be more comfortable than he was initially with the relationship with Shigure by virtue of being able to confront him again and meeting Kuragane, the headless blacksmith, and getting new blades forged and everything like that. Even someone like Eleanor, who is struggling to figure out her moral compass and the values according to which she will architect her journey through the world and her life. She's very self-aware and comfortable with that now after having traveled with the party and come to terms with life outside the Abbey in a way that someone like Velvet is still actively struggling. So that led me to think, well, what if instead of thinking of these different characters as aspects of Velvet's character, what if we think of each of them as representing different lessons for her to learn, or sort of signposts along the way to figuring out how to find her own sense of peace? So that's one thing to keep in mind. But then as I was going down that same track before the stream and thinking about other ways in which we can read the party to maybe pay attention to different elements of them as we go on into Act 3, I also had this thought, I think it was also Grail who mentioned, it's really interesting, like all of the Tales games, if they're known for anything, I would say it's for their really detailed portraiture of characters and considering who they are, how they came to be that way, what they have to overcome and what they do once they've overcome it. But this game in particular seems really interested with relationships and family relationships, and not just brother-sister, but mother-daughter, brother-in-law. There's a huge range of them. And the more that I was stepping back and thinking about that, one observation that I made that I thought was kind of interesting, I don't know how far you can push it, but it seems like every member of this party has a different kind of primary relationship guiding their life and how they think about the world, both in terms of like the family relation is different for each of these characters, and then also the role in the game that the relation plays is different. So to walk you through the different examples to tell you a little bit more of what I mean by that, for instance, you have, like if you look at the Malik Laphicet or Fee, I would say his kind of primary relationship outside the party, we're not looking at the internal to the party relationships, but sort of how they organize themselves outside the party, would be his relationship with Teresa, right? His erstwhile master who came back in full force in the last stream, someone who was initially an enemy, an antagonist, then became a begrudging ally, ultimately an antagonist, but really in an unusual way, this kind of person who is tragically isolated from everyone around her because the only thing that she cares about is her relationship with her brother. And so Laphicet reaches out for this meaning that's hard to define or consummate with Teresa. Then you have someone like Rokuro who has a relationship with his brother, who's also one of the lead antagonists and the beatstick of the Abbey, the organization we're going against. Then you have Aizen and his relationship with his sister, someone who's kept at arm's length and in fact relegated to an entirely different story, Tales of Zestiria, where her character is largely defined by coming to terms with and figuring out how to cope with the loss of her brother. So that kind of deep familial relation that's defined more by the absence than by the presence. Then you have Eleanor's relationship with her mother, who's deceased and beyond the scope of this story or really any narrative, and it's her death that's defining that for Eleanor. Magilou, of course, I'm sure we're going to get more color on her in this act, but so far we have sort of her as the oddball out, not just in terms of her disposition, but also in this relationship framework in terms of her being, I think, a little bit more isolated and not defined by family than the others. Although even with her, she has that relationship of masterhood and dominance with Bienfu, which, joke about it if you will, but that does really seem to be one of her defining characteristics, especially after we saw in the last game that Bienfu was the kind of poor, unwitting traitor to the party, passing information along to Melchior just because he was too weak to resist Melchior's magic. And Magilou was the one who discovered that and was also kind of flippantly, dismissively willing to take the blame for that with the party, to kind of half-heartedly defend Bienfu. And then, of course, at the center of it all, we have Velvet wrestling with not just one relationship, but this kind of dual relationship with her deceased brother and her brother-in-law. So again, I don't know how far you can push that, but it was interesting to me, but that they seem to have all of these different constellations of family relationships situating them within the plot, and also that the plot itself as an instance of storytelling seems to be architected around those relationships, where some of them are antagonistic, some of them are the traitors who, you know, attack the party from the inside, some with Velvet are the guiding lights that define the overall conflict. So I think it'd be really interesting to step back after we finish with the game and do a broader study of what, if anything, is it trying to say about family, and the bonds that are thrust upon us by family, and perhaps the bonds that we choose through our chosen family, and how those intersect. I feel like the game is just a rich opportunity to think about that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's a good point, Pottery. And you know, for all of the extent to which I was emphasizing the differences, it does seem that a lot of these characters seem to be defined by relationships that are absent, whether that's because of death or keeping the other family member away, like Eisen with Edna. So maybe that is an interesting through line in terms of family being important and yet not there, and figuring out how to cope with the negative space within that kind of concept and self-concept in many cases. Oh, we're back to Mass Effect 3. Fantastic. You did your homework. I'm glad you remembered to call yourself out on it, Pottery, because I honestly would have forgotten and let you get away with it. All right, so the final question in Mass Effect 3. What should have tied together the ending, according to Pottery? And this is the end-all be-all that will never be revised. No, I'm kidding, obviously. It should have been about leadership, not synthetic versus organic life. Everything about the trilogy is largely concerned with leadership, and it meshes with gameplay better. I love that, obviously, because I think leadership is also a great intersection with the idea of praxis and telling meaningful stories that also make meaning out of our actions in it. And for all we were talking about last time, especially if you're situating Mass Effect based on my folk understanding of it within a conversation about a JRPG like the Tales series, it makes all the sense in the world to me that if you really want to tell a compelling story out of all of the choices that seem to define the experience of Mass Effect, it had better be a story that comes back to reflect on the meaning of those choices in one way or another. Now, is leadership a lens that's better through which to see those actions of the player than synthetic versus organic life? That I'm not qualified to argue with you on. But it sounds like something that would make sense to me. So I'm gonna do my homework, Pottery. How about that? I'm gonna make a note of your message. And then when I'm inevitably talking with Dan over the weekend, who in addition to being a terminal Pokemon player is a terminal fan of Mass Effect, I'm going to ask him what he thinks about that, and I will report back to you when we dig back into the stream next together. So I will get you a thought on it beyond my my generic JRPG Praxis thought. I won't call it generic. I don't think that's a generic thought, just not in the weeds of Mass Effect. All right. I haven't been keeping track of enough of the stream preambles to know whether this is a new record for the amount of time we've spoken before actually getting to the game, but I'm going to guess it probably is 46 minutes, and I think I started a couple minutes early. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way, because had we started earlier, I would have had this nagging feeling that we'd done a disservice to this wonderful announcement by this amazing team and amazing company that creates these fantastic artworks that we have all decided merit so much of our time and attention and analysis and reflection. So thank you again, Bandai Namco. I will toast you again with my coffee. This is the Chinese coffee that I decided a few streams ago is probably poisoning me, but it poisons me in terms of tiring me out a while after I drink it. So I figure that's a good case for drinking it in the evening. So cheers to you, and let's get back to Tales of Berseria here on Tales of Praxis. Oh, for those who might not have seen the last stream and need to be caught up on the actual substance of where we are. So we failed to get the last Therian because Velvet went kind of quasi-dark side and ended up eating Teresa. and then they got wind that the Abbey was going to attack Titania, presumably to go after the other Therians. But Eisen, the wise sailor that he is, immediately suspected that the very fact that they were hearing about that probably meant it was a trap. It was shortly after that we found out Bienfu was the poor, unwitting simp of a traitor. And now here we are back at Titania, where poor exorcists have been outfitted with armati without really being equipped as a shepherd would be to use it properly. So it's kind of an armatus. It's kind of a Suicide Squad style kill switch, as we saw at the very end of the last stream. And we fought off a few of those exorcists and called it a night. So let's jump back in and see what the situation is here in Titania. Hope we can save Kamoana and Medusa. And of course Dial. We can't let him die before his tail grows back.
Our scout ship has returned.
Most important to the story, we were also exploring Cheagle Island.
Show us your determination.
The island inspired in some way that we still have yet to satisfyingly define by the world of Aldrint. I don't even know if it's right to say it's inspired by the world of Aldrint. It might be a more accurate thing to say it is inspired by the story of Tales of the Abyss. Replica Key of Lorelei? Jesus fucking Christ. Now see, that's interesting because when I was debating the best way to, like, interpret the nature of these islands in terms of the canonical relations between games with Grail, one thing that I actually noted on the last stream was it doesn't seem as if the literal objects that were central to the other games are showing up in this world. Rather, it's objects that seem to bear some relation or resemblance to those objects. And so it almost feels like maybe there's some sort of interesting, like, nearby parallel worlds being pulled in, or a like convergent evolution thing going on. Not like a wormhole that's actually sucking up, say, the actual Key of Lorelei that's central in the resolution of Tales of the Abyss and dropping it into the Desolation, if that is the name of this world, which I think it is. But instead we have this replica, which still invites a million questions, but doesn't feel quite as off to me as a bunch of actual artifacts like the bona fide Eye of Atimony and Key of Lorelei and everything else showing up in this world. The original, see, not this one, but the original was said to have the power to release the lost seventh sound. What an interesting way to of reframing so much complicated lore in a relatively simple and poetic single sentence. That would be funny if it were false Dane Nomos pottery. No, I think especially with how deep my addled mind is in thinking about Dane Nomos and all of its iterations for the study, I would have noticed that. Let's see. No, that's actually what got me going with this, because it was the Bodhi Blastia bracelet, which talked a little bit about like giving buffs to the abilities of the person who wears it, but also said as an additional Easter egg, oh, and it's known for like heightening your sweet tooth and desire for sweet things, which obviously is more of a wink and nod to players rather than some actual attribute of bona fide Bodhi Blastias from the world of Terca Luminaries. And Fluffy Repeat is just awesome in any world, so that doesn't even warrant analysis. It's just a brute fact about the nature of the Tales worlds that they all ought to have at least one Fluffy Repeat. See, I love the way you think, Pottery, because that's the kind of message that could equally be shrugged off as a joke or noted down as the invitation for like 15,000 word discourse. But I got enough of those in the hopper. It is, though, and I mean, in all seriousness, for a game, for any of the Tales games to be thinking about things like the corruption of reality and myth over time, especially Tales of Berseria, in terms of where it stands in relationship to Tales of Zestiria, and so many of the concepts and pieces of lore from those games, it seems like an especially appropriate Tales entry to be playing with those themes, if you ask me.
Curse you, Abby. This place was finally starting to feel like a hideout.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Pottery. It's a lot of fun. And it's a fun way to weave different like entries from the story together in a single world without making it feel, at least to someone like me, too much like camp or fan service. Like obviously it does a great service to the fans, but it seems like something in the way that you're saying that is reinforced by the overall storytelling mechanics in a way more than just like a call out cameo with no explanation or something like that.
The Exorcists. All we can do now is protect this harbor with our very lives.
Aye, let's do it. We'll guard your back, Eisen. So don't worry about us. Go give those exorcist dirtbags a big old beatdown.
You got it. I'm counting on you to protect the docks.
My man. Ooh, what did Grimoire have to say? I'll tell you, in a game that literally has an instance of Chekhov's gun, the biggest Chekhov's gun for me right now in the story is just salivating over what Grimoire is going to have to say about the final translated portion of the Book of Ancient Innominat lore, because I am so dialed into that. Speaking of permeable barriers between reality and myth, and I'm just dying to see the outcome of where that goes and whether and how it bonds the game together with the Shinto myth of Orochi and Susano.
I know this isn't the best time, but I have something.
Sorry for betraying you guys.
Please forgive me. I've been a spy for Lord Melchior. You were the one telling the Abbey about us?
I thought we all heard that.
I'm so sorry.
Melchior is a
Was Eleanor just not paying attention last time?
right next to Magilou. After all, a forest is the best place to hide a tree.
Brutal.
Melchior used his arts to place orders on Bienfu that overrode Magilou's pact.
That son of a dog.
Son of a dog. That's a new one.
I meant Melchior, not you.
Really? Exerting control over someone
So you
else's
could never
life
say that
goes
in
against
Vesperia.
everything
Rapide would not let
Eisen
that fly.
stands for.
Although Rapide doesn't think of himself as a
You're
dog, so
forced to
maybe he
do it
would.
against your will. But my spying put everyone in serious danger. That's still a fact.
The Bloodwings also knew what we were up to. The Abbey would have figured it out with or without you.
You want a fun intertextual exercise? Continue on in the skit, but read Bienfu and his confession of his sins, contraposed with Regal and his expression of his guilt over the sin of killing Alicia.
What'd you tell them anyway?
That velvet is actually pretty good wife material.
My man!
And what fishing rods Eisen prefers, and what Miss Magilou says in her sleep, and how fast Dial's tail regrows. What? That's what you told them?
It's done. Pay it no more heed. But things must be set aright.
All right. How?
Eleanor, I apologize for suspecting you. I'm sorry.
Eisen? That's right. I must apologize as well. I'm deeply sorry, Lady Eleanor. Very well. Apologies accepted all around.
Pottery, I'm legally obligated to tell you also, if you're not sufficiently overwhelmed by your OG Final Fantasy VII playthrough, you can also pre-order Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Just fully submerge yourself in the Mako bath that is Final Fantasy VII material. God knows I already have. Help me.
I'm sure they are. If I were still with the Abbey, I would likely be using an Armatus too. Endangering one's own life in order to save the many? It's the logical choice. But using something that dangerous so frequently in battle is absolutely wrong.
The Abbey must be starting to feel the pressure, too.
Even so, the losses are unacceptably high.
That's how badly they want the Therians, and how big a threat we represent. Or it could be that it has nothing to do with us, and the real point is to test their new weapon.
That can't be. It's all an experiment?
A blade proves its true worth by making it through battle unbroken. Are exorcists all that different?
Your logic is sound, but it's still awful.
We were able to survive this time, but it won't be much longer until they've perfected the armatization.
That's not the only thing we need.
Pottery, I feel like I should warn you against that, like morally, but I also kind of want to see you do that because I fear for you, my friend. I fear that if you do that, it will so thoroughly break your psyche that you will never be able to put the pieces back together, because even trying to configure in my head, like the sense that I would make of Final Fantasy VII's lore and story if I experienced it in that way, I can't even wrap my head around it. So I kind of want to see you do it just to see what your takeaway experience of the series is. I will say that was one of the interesting things about my experience with Tales of Destiny. I forget if I talked about this at the time, but I started it and I got through probably like 1 1/3 of its acts, and then I woke up one day and Final Fantasy 16 had came out, and I totally forgot about it. So I put down Destiny. I spent a full week just playing 16. I beat it, and then I went back to Destiny. And it's funny. I mean, it's an interactive medium with rich stories, right? So it's almost inevitable that when you do that, the experiences will bleed through and color the way you read all of the constitutive games. Not necessarily in a bad way. In fact, I think it can just it can radically change your experiences that you draw from the playthroughs in cool ways. Well, there are other ways to fix that, Pottery, like just playing through OG a million times. Just let the Mako bath totally soak into your skin. Embrace the, no, actually, I should avoid making too many Final Fantasy VII jokes because I don't want to accidentally spoil stuff for you. But yeah, I know that game. The man with the never-ending list knows that game, but that's every gamer at this point, isn't it? Just
about where ticking clocks are concerned. Am I wrong?
Velvet.
It doesn't matter. We kill whoever gets in our way.
an obvious point, but it's also worthwhile to consider the irony of just how self-destructive and sadistically utilitarian the Abbey's use of the Armatus is, when, in the case of Saray the Shepherd and Tales of Zestiria, it was the purest conceivable emblem for people uniting in service of the, overlapping content of their dreams. Not to call Artorias a false shepherd, but hey. Tiny Bronco! Oh, man. How did the return to Nibelheim treat you? Did you have any strong reactions to it?
We will need to be
Or suspicions about where the story might go from there, I should say.
Its guardian was angry at it.
Hold on. You can read a guardian's heart?
Yeah, sort of.
I imagine we probably want to go in the direction of all the exorcists, but I'm just kind of interested to see if there's anything to be had in these towers as we go. I think that's a warranted curiosity, Pottery. And I'll leave it at that. Oh, Man, I wish I could be experiencing that for the first time again with you. It's one of those games, too. I mean, you could say this about any work in, well, any kind of artistic canon, whether it's video games or TV or film or books, but it's one of those that's such a touchstone in video game storytelling that after you beat it, I guarantee as you go back to play other games that you've played before or play other new games, you'll find yourself saying all the time, oh, that's where that's from. Because so many games took so many lessons from Final Fantasy VII. I feel like, I don't know, dude, like selective amnesia, I feel like that's one of those classic abilities that sounds really good until you actually see how it works out. Like, this isn't quite the same thing, but I even think of that classic Adam Sandler movie, Click, where he like autopilots his life. And he's like, oh yeah, that's great, I'll skip through all the boring stuff, and then it ends up completely fucking him. I worry it would be one of those abilities where, yeah, great to forget about things in theory until you get down to the praxis of it, I suppose. Oh, that's funny. Because our conversations were overlapping and I assumed you were talking about like the memory weirdness that was going on with Cloud, as opposed to what I was saying about experiencing a story for the first time. Too many kinds of selective amnesia going on.
Makes me sick.
But still, it fits their reason. They want strength, and no art can squeeze strength from a Moloch like that one.
Alright, let's see. I'm guessing we want to go... Oh, well, it tells us where we want to go. That takes the fun out of it, doesn't it? Alright, well... I'm going to guess if there were stuff on the other side, it would be telling us. So I'll just go in pursuit of the star. Beyond putting together thoughts about the Tales of Arise DLC and toasting Bandai Namco, I'll say the other thing I did in celebration was I finally got off my butt, and as I'm building my personal collection to mark and memorialize Tales of Praxis, I got a copy of the Tales of Arise Collector's Edition because I do want there to be a wave of new people who suddenly discover the game and fall in love with it, but I'm anxious that if that happens, things like prices on the collector's edition will jump pretty drastically pretty quickly, because that can happen sometimes. So I said to myself, Aaron, that's a perfect incentive to go ahead and do that right now. So excited to add that to the bookshelf paying tribute to this wonderful series. We talk sometimes about how, different versions and editions can be such a cash grab, but I do really think that in the broader scheme of things, Bandai Namco typically does a really thoughtful job of the various versions they put together of their stuff. Like, I'm always impressed with even something as simple as just the quality and care and comprehensiveness of the art books that they include, and the soundtracks are always really carefully curated. Really adds a special way to keep the game in your memory, like we were talking about before, well beyond your times actually playing it. Well, I'll tell you, another great way in which it really feels like the third act of the game is those armatized exorcists really do hit hard. Like, even on normal difficulty, those regular fights certainly feel like a difficulty jump from the regular fights we'd been encountering up to this point. Really gives you the gameplay experience that things are coming to a head. I'll divide, my love. I do appreciate that I can buy you. Perhaps just a couple. Whoa! We receive a discount, even on top of the one that Velvet bullied the poor turtles into in the first place. Cool, cool. Can we enhance any of our weapons? Should have checked that sooner. We can't enhance any of the ones that we have equipped right now, so I'm going to say we can forge ahead with what we have, and then if we need to upgrade later, we can always do that. Lustral. Ah, Medusa! Oh, all our friends!
So,
Kuragane!
got away.
Come on.
I could do to flee. I have lost face.
Come on, dude.
I was so scared.
It's okay now, dear. I won't let them cause you any more pain.
Medusa was the one who saved us.
Thank you.
I could never forgive them for involving children. That's all. Kuragane, head to the rear docks. Keep them safe. If you find the prince and Griffin, take the Von Altia and escape.
As you wish. Rokuro, take the Stormquell. I made it with the orichalcum you gave me.
You actually did it.
I abandoned all desire and forged it with a clear mind. You will find no harder sword in all.
My guy, that is zen as fuck.
Stormquell, made from orichalcum. I'll use it well, Kurogane.
Oh, I got a feeling that means we're gonna find our old buddy Shigure. Speaking of old family relations and grudges, they're not all dead or out of focus in the story. Some of them remain threateningly present.
It's complete. The orichalcum blade, Stormquell.
It's the hardest blade the world has ever known.
Even to an untrained eye, that sword is obviously something special.
Kurogane is a real master. Color me amazed.
The Godblade Stormhowl versus the Orichalcum Stormquell. This will be something to see.
Will it end in triumph, or will you need to try more oomph? The gods alone know.
The gods have nothing to do with it. Skill alone will determine who lives and who dies.
I wonder if that's something that automatically equips to Rokuro if we need to do it. Is it not an actual dagger set? Is it just a key item? Yeah, I'm not seeing it in here. I don't think it's the Kurogane daggers. Yeah, no, that's different. Alright then. Onward. Yeah, it's funny, for all the setup with Velvet being the Lord of Calamity and the game feeling very tonally different from Zestiria at the outset, especially now as we're getting further into it. I was thinking about this when Medusa was talking about just, I couldn't bear it that they were involving children in this. It really does seem like This is certainly too simplistic a way to read the story overall, but one thing that seems really present right now is just the idea that everyone outside the Abbey, like the protagonists, even the supporting characters, are identified by having a clear sense of whatever it is that they value in the world, versus the Abbey just being kind of subordinate in this authoritarian way to this like vacuous dictum of the many over the one and pure utilitarianism, which, if you see this game in that light, reduces pretty directly to everything that Saray was working for in Tales of Zestiria, the idea of empowering everyone to clearly identify what it is that they value in their heart and enact that in the world. So suddenly he seems quite alike with respect to this Lord of Calamity.
Managed to avoid capture, huh, Prince?
As did you. You did well to avoid Artorias and his forces.
Lord Artorias is here?
He is. I overheard some exorcists mention it.
Artorias.
If you want to die, do it alone.
Artorias.
We're saving the Therians before anything else.
Besides, we're so close to deciphering the ancient book.
I know. We'll escape from the rear docks. Follow me.
Watch out, Princey Wincy. You ain't no Therian. If Griffin gets there first, we're leaving you behind.
Understood.
Speaking of dogs, my nerd has been exceptionally barky all day, so I apologize for her ongoing excitement. The apartment complex checked everyone's vents and heaters in anticipation of the coming winter, so they were in and out of buildings and all the animals were freaking out, so I think that got her riled up in a way in which she still hasn't quite come down.
Will Artorias use an armatus as well?
I don't know. It's hard to believe that the Abbey's leader would risk using an art that could end his own life, but...
The Shepherd's reputation would be ruined if he self-destructed over some botched formula. On the other hand, if the risk is based on the user's ability, then the Legates might not have any trouble.
So if Artorias were to try, he'd armatize with Innominat.
Can an Empyrean be used as an armatus? I'm not even sure Artorias can handle that.
He'll do it. Why else would he try to revive Innominat?
But we're talking about an Empyrean.
He'll succeed. I'm certain of it. This is the Shepherd Artorias we're talking about here. Whether God or devil stands in his way, he won't be swayed. That's who he is.
Velvet!
But it won't save him. He'll die by my hand. Empyrean or no Empyrean.
Visions of Heldolf armatizing with the corrupt Mautellus. Yeah, I ended up really enjoying it the second time in Tales of Zestiria Pottery, but I get what you mean, and my predilections notwithstanding, it is really interesting just how asymmetric an experience it is. Because I agree, I think there's something about just even the simple idea of how fluid and powerful the enemies are with it versus how kind of unwieldy it feels. Managing it from the side of the player. It's interesting, that asymmetric relationship. That's right, we're going to the back docks again. And it's a cool contrast case to bring out the theming of the games as well, right? Like, for all I was saying about Saray and Velvet and their missions at this point feeling very aligned, especially with the distinction in gameplay. I think that helps to underscore the idea that when it comes to this crew we have right here, they really are still people with their own maxims and ways of viewing the world, and they're just together for pragmatic purposes working through the quest at hand, but they have very different directives. So they certainly wouldn't do anything like fuse together in pursuit of a single dream, which is, of course, what the shepherd and his brood are all about at the end of the day. So it's a nice case, I think, in which gameplay actually does a lot to distinguish otherwise very similar feeling stories and plot beats from one another.
Don't waste my time.
Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. There we go.
When I'm this close, I won't miss! Form zero!
Be proud. You made me unleash my full power.
Guess it's time to fight.
Not the elephant heads. Oh, talk about a haunting enemy design. P.T. Barnum wants to know your location.
Stop fooling around.
But I'm serious about my fooling around.
Bison, there's trouble. The enemy found the Von Eltia. Several enemy ships are heading this way right now.
Set sail, now!
I'm, glad we were able to save everyone.
Me too, buddy.
There's no escape, Lord of Calamity.
Benwick, forget me. Take the Von Altia and leave, now.
That's madness. What do you think you're doing?
If I don't take them down, they'll sink you from afar.
Raise anchor! We'll make it through somehow!
Aye, aye. But don't die. You hear me?
Crazy kids.
We're not going to die. We're going to kill.
For those who are curious and can hear Evie continuing to lose her mind, I took a peek out the window and there's an absolute legion of dogs congregating on the sidewalk outside, so she doesn't go crazy without a reason, usually. She's very frustrated that she cannot reach the dogs.
We'll head to the front docks.
To steal an Abbey ship, I take it.
That's where the Abbey's main forces will be concentrated. And Lord Artorias should be there too.
All the better.
Good.
But we still don't have a way to fight Innominat.
I told you, if you want to die, do it alone.
I'm not asking you to come with me.
Use me.
Personal.
Don't worry. Griffin got away. If you use me as a hostage, you should be able to steal a ship.
I owe you one for this. But don't expect gratitude.
I don't.
Looks like this is our best and only bet.
Velvet has very quickly turned around from the mental breakdown at the end of Act 2 also to lean all the further into her resolve and determination to quash Artorias. I almost feel, I don't think we got this too explicitly in how she was deciding to cope, but I feel as if she's kind of using it as a coping mechanism where she's saying, well, all right, if the heart of my pain is the loss of Laphicet and I've become this kind of monstrous being who's no different than Artorias in terms of what I did to Oscar and Teresa, then I might as well use my monstrous nature in order to rectify things in my own past and kill my own monster.
We're going to the front
Which is an
docks.
interesting way to
Don't forget
come
that.
back again to the vengeance
Arthur's first maxim,
with which
right.
Velvet began the game, but with sort of a new resolve and instrumentalist idea of using that revenge mindset to achieve something that is, if not healthier, at least a bit more directed at driving to the heart of the pain that has shaped you as a person.
I'm worried. About this whole hostage thing, you mean? Yeah, that too. But Velvet's acting really
That's
scared.
what I was saying.
And that's unusual. How? Magilou! Yelling at me won't change anything.
Her thirst for blood knows no bounds, and she's got all the self-control of a wounded beast. With the way she...
Oh, that's a great point too about showing with the different eras how the Armatus is being developed. Pottery, I missed that message. Yeah, but I love that. That's a great thing to call out.
She's acting. I'm not sure she'll be able to escape.
She's cut her way through all her problems before. She can do it again.
I hope so. But everything has its limits. There's no blade that will not break. Nor is there such a heart. When the time comes, you'll need to make a decision. It's best you start figuring it out now.
When the time comes.
That's a nice directive to Laphicet to keep in mind as we continue on in the third act. When the time comes, you'll need to make a decision. We really get a lot of insights from Magilou before we learn much of anything about how she came to be the way she is, and what she's really all about.
Blast away the shadows of darkness!
This fight is over!
Getting me all turned around in these dungeons.
Phew. Well, looks like we shook off our pursuit.
Of course we did. This is the Von Eltia.
No, it can't be. This is terrible.
Oh, did you finally decipher it?
Turn back, now!
What? There's no way we can do that.
I finally deciphered.
Tell us!
Part of the book. If what it says is true, then Innominat is already.
The coast is clear.
All right, let's make a break for the docks.
You're running.
My man. Oh, my men!
It's Lord Artorias and... No, stop!
Please, now's the time to negotiate for safe passage.
Step back, Your Highness. The girl before you wants nothing other than to kill me.
You better believe it!
I was gonna say, you can't really argue with that at this point.
We're leaving.
Let me go! I have to save her!
That ain't gonna happen, kid. Don't forget you're my ticket out of here, too.
I'm not your tool!
My man.
Try to stop me and I'll take you down, even you.
Wow. Some serious character development from Laphicet going on here. He found his fire.
Your Armatis isn't gonna stop me!
Don't worry. I have another trick up my sleeve.
That sword. Is that Orichalcum? Good job, little bro. Never seen that before.
Damn right! The hardest sword there is!
It may be made of Orichalcum.
It's time. Stand down.
Don't be a spoil sport. I'm just starting to have fun.
Get caught in the middle of this, and even you won't survive unscathed. The one to face Velvet will be Innominat.
It looked like Ceres. You think? No, that's not Ceres.
Hello, sister. Did you miss me?
Laphicet!
Laphie. Velvet's brother? So that's his kid.
Now that was a slow play.
I am Laphicet Crow. And more. I am also Empyrean Innominat, the Suppressor. No. That's... Innominat?
Wow.
If you're gonna do
I can't
this,
believe
you
I
gotta
forgot such a
commit.
devastating
He's
twist.
our enemy.
I know! This is just another illusion!
I don't know about that.
I'll devour all of you!
Oh, Jesus, it's on!
Velvet. That's what you've been doing this whole time. Struggling against all reason.
Shut up! Don't you dare pretend to be my brother!
Interesting, too, since we started the stream talking about Tales of Arise, that the final form of the Great Spirit of Rena... I'm not going to talk over Laphicet and Innominat. That the final spirit or physical manifestation of the great astral spirit of Rena that you confront is called the subsumer, and then for Innominat to be called the suppressor. What nice, arresting, complimentary names for subordinating other aspects of the world beneath yourself as a hegemonic entity. I love that. Ugh, Tales games and their names, I tell you.
All your pain, your suffering, and all of it for you.
Is this the power of an Empyrean?
Exactly. This boy is Empyrean Innominat the Suppressor.
But how? We took away his strength!
By kidnapping the Therians? Sorry to burst your bubble, but you were a wee bit late. It was never about the amount of malevolence the Therians devoured. What we needed to awaken him
Was 8 different types. Greed.
Pokemon rules.
Lust, cowardice, selfishness, obsession. Those 6 Innominat had already obtained by the time you managed to tear the Therians away. That leaves just the 2 that Velvet carries inside her. Once Innominat has them, he will fully awaken.
And I don't even need an Earthpulse for that. I can eat them right here.
I tell you, Will!
Oh,
If you're
you
that
just got that sword, dude.
way. Ow.
It's all an illusion.
Leave it to a god to dismissively utter,
That
ow.
hurts, Velvet.
Shut up! Shut up!
Are you going to kill me, sister?
You know what it is? I was, not to interrupt the revelation of Innominat, but I found myself thinking with some of the things he was saying, man, this feels a lot like Mythos, but in a way that is much more detached than the bitter resentment that Mythos has because of everything that happened with Martel and his history in the Karlon War. But it's more of, like, he looks like Mythos in his build, but it's more of Yggdrasil, that idea of the emotionally suppressed angel of Crucius. That seems to be, like, the dead affect of that seems to be perfectly alive in Innominat. And on the other pole of affect, we have Velvet.
Velvet, it was always so hard for me. I was so frail. All I did was cause you trouble. Is that why? Is that why you wanted me to go away?
I never wanted you to go. I wanted you to live. I wanted you to be by my side. But in the end, I couldn't protect you. All I could do was avenge you. To get my vengeance, I devoured. I killed.
Of course you did.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Laphie. It hurt, didn't it? Fee! Kill him, please!
But he's...
It's Laphicet! He's my brother!
But Velvet, I never wanted you to avenge me. I mean, it's that sort of selfish emotion that creates malevolence, that creates the demons.
What?
That's why I'm going to help Arthur. We're going to make all the pain in the world go away.
An end to suffering.
Including that hate, that ugly malevolence in you.
Ugly malevolence.
The awakened Innominat will suppress all negative emotions. He will remake humanity into beings free from sin.
You take away all their sins, and people aren't people anymore.
I think that's just what they intend. Like how they steal free will from the Malachim.
It will be a peaceful world, free from pain.
So your goal this whole time was to rob people of their free will?
If even an exorcist like you can let your emotions tempt you to betrayal, clearly it is the only way.
I'll make this world a safe place free from demons. That has always been my dream. Don't worry. My wounds will heal. Once I have eaten you, sister.
That should be a red flag too, because we know, I mean, forget about what Velvet knows and what she's going through. It's been impressed on us multiple times throughout the game that Laphicet's dream as a kid growing up was to explore the world. So this reconception of his dream, especially in a duology of games that cares so self-consciously about dreams, should be a red flag to us.
What's going on? This is bad. We'll be swallowed alive. Wait. Everything I did for you. How could you do this to... Thank you. It's because of what you've done that I need to make amends. You've hurt so many people, and all for nothing. You can't. Fluffy!
My man. My boy, my lad.
Unfortunate.
But they're within me now. I'll find them.
A weapon can't just be hard, you know. It's gotta be flexible too, or it'll snap.
If you're addressing me, do you care to test that out?
Nah, think I'll wait on that. At least until you and Innominat finish up your armorization.
Shepherd Artorias, what have you done?
It's all according to my plan, Your Highness. Let us return to the capital.
Wow. What a great scene. What the heck? Are we back in the Calyx?
What just happened?
We were eaten by an Earthpulse.
This happened to you before, didn't it?
It's different this time. It looks like our awakened friend Innominat is using the land as his vessel. In other words, this Earthpulse is now part of his body.
Similar to what Mautelis
I was
does
able to
in the
flee him
future.
only because I found a rift in the Earthpulse as it formed.
So, Velvet and the others?
I guess I won my bet. Took long enough.
Bravo! You do have a talent, if nothing else.
Bleh.
Oh, Melchior. If you're here, this place must be more important than I suspected.
Move aside. I must close this Earthpulse rift.
Biensu, protect the rift! Do well, and I'll forgive that little betrayal of yours. But if you run, my curse will follow you for eternity.
You got it!
It looks like I just won my bet. If I let you seal this rift now, I'll never collect. Illusions won't work on me. You can't break a heart that's already broken.
Oh, girl.
That day, I interrupted my art when your heart broke. I suppose I was taking pity upon my student.
Uh-huh.
But this time, know that I won't hold back. I will grind your heart into
I do remember the payoff for Magilou's character being really worthwhile. And and I'm starting to get very delighted at the imminent discovery of that. The girl with a broken heart, Melchior's student.
I'm glad to see you're okay. It looks like we got sucked into the Earthpulse.
Are you alright, Eleanor? What about everyone else?
I'm fine, but...
Kill. They killed so many. Murdered. Slaughtered. It was all for him.
And here I thought she was broken at the end of the second act.
Him, but he said I was ugly. Nothing. Nothing. All for nothing. I can't. I have to kill.
Jesus.
Die.
This reminds me of Shion after Volron captures her. When she's just completely broken.
Come on, we're leaving. I have to kill them.
But Innominat is your...
It's just an illusion! A fake! A trick! Or, what if it was really him? Then that means he betrayed me, doesn't it? You think I can't kill a traitor like him? Why? Why wouldn't I? Just how many do you think I've killed? You, who watched me do it!
Jesus.
I'm... sorry.
Velvet!
Fluffy, time to wake up. I told you to stop calling me Laphie. I'm not a little kid anymore.
Grumble, huh? You must be feeling good.
Innominat!
Fever, I'm afraid. No, this is different. A vision of the past?
Jeez.
See? I killed him! It was easy! I'm used to it by now. Alright, we're getting out of here! With your power.
But...
Now!
We've gotta find Aizen and the rest.
I said now! Enough! Stop it! They're the ones who need to be stopped! Isn't that right? I'll kill them. I'll kill them all!
You must calm down.
Fine. I'll calm down and look for an exit. That's what you want, right?
No, don't leave the comb. The most devastating symbol for Velvet yet.
Whatever the case, we have to get out of here. Let's keep moving for now.
Yeah, I guess so.
Wow! That was quite a crescendo. So many things to think about. I pulled out a few notes on the more funny, but I think telling side, since we're doing Tales of Praxis and thinking about comparative study. I thought, how funny but maybe appropriate would it be to do like a comparative look at different types of poor broken girls in these games? Like we have Velvet broken in the sense of being reduced to pure unfiltered rage. We have someone like Colette, who's broken just with the total loss of her soul during the journey of regeneration and the preparation for her to become Martel's vessel. We have Estelle, who's just robbed of her belief that she can be useful in any positive way in the world and turned into Alexei's puppet. We have Shion, who's completely robbed of faith that she has friends or any kind of support and just reduced to a pure point of loneliness. Like the series, I wouldn't have had this on my Tales bingo card, but very deft at painting incredibly articulate and diverse pictures of strong young women reduced to just completely broken heaps before being built back up. And then on the more serious note, to ground us before we get back into it, I know I mentioned the idea of Innominat versus Mythos. Another thing that's interesting to keep in mind as we get into the endgame now, and Artorias has showed his hand in terms of what it is that he is trying to achieve through Innominat, the suppression of all negative emotions and therefore the mitigation of all malevolence in the world. Interesting to ask the question, since we have Tales of Symphonia in mind, and it's also, I think, a really apt comparison. Symphonia also gives us the model of Mythos' age of lifeless beings, trying to eliminate discrimination from the world by annihilating all distinction between different life forms. So interesting to pose the question as we go on here, do those two plots amount to the same thing in terms of robbing people of their difference and robbing people of their negative emotion? Or are there different nuances in each? And if so, what do those nuances say about what each story is wrestling with and why? Also, we'll see how the story goes and ties up, but with that last piece of Innominat being sort of a reincarnation or manifestation of Laphicet, which I had forgotten, and remembering where the story goes from here, which I don't remember every beat, but I do remember where it ends up. I am starting to get a picture of going back to the model of the myth of Orochi and Susano and Amaterasu, of how this might be an interesting reimagination or reconfiguration of that myth. So excited to dig more into that, and we can think more about that once we get to the final turn, because I don't want to spoil anything or put the cart before the horse in terms of talking about it too much now. But it's got to do with a girl and a brother and a comb and a whole lot of cosmic rectification, as I am quickly realizing is so often the case in these fine games.
Are you all right, Laphicet?
Yeah,
No!
I am. But I'm worried about Velvet.
This may be more than he can bear. Not that I blame him. Laphicet, perhaps you should rest within me for a while.
No.
But if you don't, then...
I know. But if I hide, it'll only hurt Velvet even more. I should at least be at her side.
You really have become stronger.
But I haven't. I hate it. But there's nothing I can do to help Velvet now.
Of course there is. Having someone nearby can be all the help you need sometimes. Like when I lost my mother.
Eleanor.
So, let's keep an eye on Velvet while we search for the others, alright? Just remember that I'm always with you, Laphicet.
I know. Thank you.
Interesting, too, to see the continued development of Fee, especially in tandem with everything that's happening with Velvet. And remember Magilou's words, eventually he's going to have to make a choice. But I'm noticing that right now, especially in terms of how Velvet has kind of collapsed into a puddle of rage, whereas Fee is, I think, also kind of defining his next arc through, if not rage, then at least more of like fiery, and I would use the word aggressive, determination and resolve, the way we saw him stand up to Aizen. And so it's interesting that that same kind of emotional palette that seems to be negatively consuming Velvet right now is making a difference in helping Laphicet go from first simply a tool to then someone who was able to articulate his self-concept to someone who is now like actively standing up in defense of that self-concept and his ability to act and speak for himself.
That we're finished here.
Always hits me so much more impactfully than one might imagine without playing a Tales game when the party is reduced through dramatic plot events from a large party of 6 or 8 down to a small subsection of that, like 2 or 3, which is what we're experiencing right now. Even listen to what they're saying as we enter battles under these new conditions. Are we ready for this? I don't know if we can handle this. All of their confidence is just gassed.
This fight is over.
Nice literary symmetry too. Remember, the last time we were in an Earthpulse like this was right after Act 1. And I suppose that I think I had this thought while we were watching that scene with Innominat. I would say it's fair to call the climax with Oscar and Teresa and then Velvet's dream sequence after that the act break from Act 2 to Act 3. But I could also certainly see an equally sound reading of the game that puts the act break back during the revelation of Innominat and then falling into the Earthpulse, at which point then the acts are demarcated both between Act 1 and Act 2, and then also Act 2 and Act 3 with these Earthpulse points, which is nice symmetry. But then also to think about how the first time we were here, Velvet was figuring out how to put herself back together by carrying and caring for Laphicet, who was on the verge of being taken in by malevolence and turning into a demon. And now the shoe is on the other foot, and Velvet has collapsed into all of her most malevolent nature. And poor Laphicet and Eleanor, the pure ones, are trying to figure out how to bring her back from the edge. It's a simple but simply beautiful symmetry in the story. I mean, I gotta see what's over here.
Are we ready for this?
I was thinking too, I had this thought as we were working through Titania, trying to rescue all the Therians and then figure out how to get out of there and trying to figure out where Artorias was and running back and forth. It's funny because this is just total coincidence that I was working through this part of Tales of Phantasia at the same time, but it tells you how, like I was saying to you, Pottery, earlier in the stream, the games you happen to be playing at the same time, they can really color your experience of the playthrough and what you see in them. So literally, I think just yesterday, I was working through this part in Tales of Phantasia where you're trying to find this researcher and a key supporting character in the game, Edward Morrison, and you're sent on this comically absurd wild goose chase for him where he's trying to find, you ultimately discover basilisk scales in this desert area, but you're always one step behind him, so you go from oasis to oasis and town to town, and you always just miss him, only to end up back where you began, to find him at an inn, because you just keep not quite crossing paths with him. And so having that fresh in my head made me really attuned to the fact that we were just running back and forth more than once from one end of Titania to the other. And I don't know whether this was intentional or not, but especially for a game that grounds you repeatedly in this literal and metaphorical motif of the prisons that characters face, it was really interesting at this moment, where the Abbey gets the upper hand and ultimately reveals Innominat, and Velvet becomes so inwardly imprisoned in terms of who she is and unable to find meaning in the actions that she's taken. to kind of have that prefigured and foreshadowed through the gameplay by having you just run hither and thither throughout the prison without really accomplishing anything, or even understanding where your enemy is or what they're trying to achieve, because they're 3 steps ahead of you the whole time. In a game where, like we've said, the level design doesn't always seem to be especially inspired or interesting, or insert whatever criticism you want here, that strikes me as a really subtle but effective way of saying something that's pretty narratively meaningful and gets it just experientially in your bones as a player, merely through the way that you're guided in the dungeon. Or not guided, as the case may be.
We will need to be extremely wary.
They were nothing.
Great hanging with you, Pottery. I'm so glad we were able to chat through the Tales of Arise DLC together and speculate about it and get excited. Enjoy working through Final Fantasy VII and Arise and everything else. Excited to continue digging into Berseria with you next time you're around. Always a pleasure, my friend. Game well and think well over the weekend, all right? And don't be a stranger as you continue to... Well, as you dig back into Arise, I should say. Excited to hear your thoughts again. All right, onward, friends. Let's see if we can help Velvet out of her metaphorical prison, now that we've gotten her out of the literal one. Although, I don't know. It's yet to be determined, I think, whether these Earthpulses constitute a prison. Interesting, because I remember earlier in the game, the first time we fell in here, we were comparing it to things like the Lifestream and the Sephiroth, which are very directly described as basically the like the chakras of the earth in Tales of the Abyss, but especially with the way that Innominat is subsuming the earth itself as his vessel, that context, and now being back here, especially after being in a prison like Titania, it's easy to see what should be a spiritual center of the earth as something which is itself a prison. Like Innominat said before we ended up here, we are within him in a way that makes the alien nature of this place feel oppressive rather than simply foreign. Great manic piano track in the background too.
Could he really be Velvet's younger brother?
It could have been an illusion intended to torment her. Don't you agree, Eleanor?
I do. Velvet's objective is avenging her brother, after all. We've all seen how strongly she feels about it. I find it hard to believe that the one so dear to her is still alive.
I don't know what powers Innominat possesses, but I think that really was her little brother. Velvet was able to see past Melchior's illusions. But look at her now. I just don't want to believe that the real Laphi could do such a thing.
Could it be possible that Innominat was reborn into her brother's body?
I don't know. But if that was the case, I'm not sure Velvet would be in so much agony.
Yes, I guess. Innominat actually being Velvet's brother. It makes a twisted sort of sense. But it's too awful.
I do wonder, and I'm reaching the point since we're getting so deep into the story and I'm starting to remember how to connect the end game with everything else that's going on, that I don't want to speculate too much because it might be one of those cases where subconsciously I remember what's going to happen, even if I couldn't consciously articulate it. But I'm going to speculate a little because as we're trying to figure out whether Innominat is really Laphicet or not, and given what we know about Artorias' plan to suppress all negative human emotions now, I wonder whether part of what might be making Innominat seem so similar to Laphicet without being identical with Laphicet is if he's the case of like Laphicet being reborn but without any of Laphicet's negative emotions. And so he's this kind of sanitized form of Laphicet, which is therefore unrecognizable despite his being recognizable. That would be an interesting way of showing that uncanny valley of what it means for someone to like try to retain their identity while only having access to some of their emotional life. You're mine, Hell Lady. Hell Lady versus Calamity Jane. They never stood a chance.
I did good, didn't I? I don't think we have a chance. I'm not one to go easy.
Are we ready for this?
There are none who can resist my spear.
I think that was the first time we saw Eleanor's higher order mystic art. It was very cool. Lost Phone Drive. The tails-addled tinfoil hat part of my mind also can't help but compare that with the phonic language of arts in Tales of the Abyss. I do wonder what meaning Lost Phone is intended to have. Presumably something to do with the ancient tongue, if I had to guess.
Did you think you could escape me?
I do find myself wishing that Velvet were a bit more viscerally wrathful in her lines in battle and after battle. Although I suppose she did also appear to break a bit in the other direction after Eleanor told her to calm down, so maybe that's the explanation for why she isn't so insane in these fights. Garuda! Unexpected Final Fantasy 16. What are you doing here? Ugh, that apparition voice is so unnerving. The way it whispers right before it attacks. Get me out of here. Get me out of here. I think I might have just gone the wrong way. Got me turned around. Maybe? Oh, maybe not, actually. Damn. This is the problem with taking on too many battles and seeking out all the chests around here. Easy to lose your sense of direction in this prison of Innominat.
Is this... Look! Hey, stay with me. I'll get someone right away.
It's okay. I'm tired.
Have you been journeying long, then?
10 years. My master entrusted everything to me, but I couldn't do anything.
10 years?
My wings are weak. It doesn't matter anymore.
Oh. That's heartbreaking.
If you've been working that hard, you surely need a break. I just happened to get my hands on some prickle boar meat. I'll be cooking up a stew for dinner. But would you care to join me?
Huh? No,
All I have on me now is this apple. Here. Once your belly is full of warm food, you'll be able to pick yourself back up. I can feel it. Your body is shouting, I want to live.
I'm a disgrace. I don't deserve to live.
Is life something you have to earn? To deserve?
Well...
These feelings are natural. You eat when you're hungry and cry when you're sad. Feeling these things is proof that we're alive.
That's what Velvet always said to Fee.
What's your name? Mine is Celica. Celica Crow.
I'm an exorcist. Artorias. No, Arthur. I'm Arthur.
God, the direction of these scenes is just insane. What an interesting framing of it, too, because so often in JRPGs at this point, I feel like you get these sorts of windows of insight into the antagonists who have been guiding things all along, especially in recent JRPGs in the last few years. But the idea that because of the way things have transpired, the protagonist is so incensed that she can't engage with the reality of those experiences or memories at all and just wants to burn through them or shred through them, as the case may be. That's a really interesting twist on that trope, I think.
What in the world was that?
My man!
Girl, Eisen! You saw it too, then?
Sure did. Artorias. And he called himself Arthur.
I've heard of this. The Earthen Historia.
Aha.
They say that events on the world's surface cast imprints on the Earthpulse that runs below.
In other words, an illusion of the past.
It's not.
Which also, if we need to remember how cool this game is in terms of thinking about its mechanics, is the lore-based explanation of what save states are and why you have the icon for Earth mana at all the save points.
An illusion. That was my sister. So, he managed to fool her too, is it? Yes, that must be it. That's why she freed me from the prison.
Rokuro, have you recovered from your wounds?
Yep, tough as nails. That's old Rokuro. I'm more worried about Velvet. She okay?
Super not.
How could she be okay? Innominat is reborn.
Nope. We didn't even get close to going through the whole stream on one charge this time.
And it's her little brother.
A blade can't just be hard. It's gotta be flexible, or it'll snap the first time it meets an unexpected
Oh, like older brother, like younger brother.
Understood the true meaning of strength, and so did he.
Let's just worry about ourselves for now. This Earthpulse is completely under Innominat's domain. We can think of it as an extension of his body.
That's what I was saying.
Which means my power won't get us out of here.
Be wary. Innominat may be the one showing us these memories. Remember, he's after Velvet.
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing.
Inside her.
True. And we may be able to use that against him to get us out of here.
What are you saying? Just use her?
If it's necessary.
We have to keep moving. Nothing will be gained by staying here. And we ought to look for Magilou. Even she doesn't deserve to be stuck here forever.
It's such a tease to say that Velvet has two types of malevolence inside her, but not put a name to them yet. I'm interested in what they are. My immediate thought, of course, was the 7 deadly sins, but there are 8 types of malevolence, right? 8 heads. So I don't think it would just map to those, unless I'm miscounting. Yeah, because there were 7 Therians, right? But also Velvet as a Therian has 2 types, so that would sum to 8 types of malevolence, right? I think I'm doing that math right. Well, I'm sure the game will tell us. Oh, I had an interesting thought on that last memory we saw of Artorias as well. And again, it is a good question. I mean, talk about playing with narrative reliability. We really have no idea which author is behind the presentation of those stories from the past yet, or what their motivations might be, if it's just an expression of the world, or Innominat, or even Artorias puppeting Innominat, or some other author altogether. So hard to think about the valence behind those stories that are being told. But that said, to see that picture of Artorias as having failed in his mission, he hasn't lived up to his master's expectation for 10 years, and he has that just defeatist expression saying outright, "I don't deserve to live." it is an interesting twist on the character of this guy who has resolved to suppress all negative emotion in the world, to think that if he's someone who's lived through the struggle of the truly suicidal impulse and being so dominated by these negative feelings that, like we saw there, he seemed to completely lose his will until Celica called him back from it, then it's not as if he would suddenly become purely sympathetic or someone to whom you could relate, but it would become at least a little more sympathetic, I think, the idea of this plan to rid everyone of their negative emotion, to say that, yeah, at a minimum, at least people then would be able to operate within the world without annihilating themselves over time, just by virtue of the weight of existence. Now, granted, that doesn't seem to quite be what Artorias is saying in terms of his stated value system and the dicta according to which he runs the Abbey, but it's an interesting question to say, well, does he really believe in the Abbey's principles, or is that just his way of enacting the sentiments that germinated from those more personal experiences of the dark emotions that he experienced in his own past?
Oh, what is this Earth and Historia you mentioned?
As I've said, an Earthpulse is a natural force that circulates within the land. Wind blows, water flows, birds fly, flowers bloom. All actions in nature leave their mark on the Earthpulse. These marks become etched within the land itself and remain a part of the Earthpulse, like memories.
So it's a record of the world's past.
Does it remember human and Moloch deeds?
Everything that occurs is part of nature, including the acts of humans, Malachim, and even demons.
So that means that even this very conversation is being recorded in the Earth and Historia?
Anything bad I've done in secret, insults you've ever told behind someone's back, the land sees it all.
My insults?
Especially your
It's just
insults.
An example. Pay it no mind.
Does that mean that Innominat is drawing specific memories from the Earth and Historia and showing them to Velvet?
I believe so. That's how Rokurou and I saw the same thing, even though we weren't there. With the Earth itself as his vessel. It's a trick only Innominat could pull off.
Awfully devious for a self-styled Empyrean.
But the attack did strike home. Keep a close watch on her until we're out of the Earthpulse.
Right.
Interesting, too, in a series that so oftentimes plays with the way that we think about different eras in the world's history or different aspects of our own time without doing literal time travel, to have this idea of the Earth recording all of the memories throughout its history. And then remember, this game is a prequel to the game that took place after these events, but was something that presumably players, like we did, played prior to this. So it's interesting to think that, so oftentimes in games and just in stories in general, you get this idea of time not being a linear set of experiences, but rather something that you can get outside of and see as more of a topology, and everything kind of happens at once, and you can just attend to different aspects of the timeline for different reasons at different times. And so to recognize this world as something that has like the metaphysical infrastructure of the Earthpulse to record and express its memories, then, at least to me, raises this interesting idea that perhaps the player could be being shown these memories from different parts of the planet for different reasons at different times. And so then maybe that could give us grounding within the narrative to try to run an explanation of why it might be, given all the events of this world and what it is that people have experienced, that the world itself might want us to see and experience the events of Zisteria and everything that Saray goes through prior to seeing these events that were actually earlier in its history, as enacted through Tales of Berseria and the struggles of Velvet. There might actually be a narrative reason why the later events wanted to go before the earlier events in our experience of the overall story of Zisteria plus Berseria.
Velvet's psyche took a heavy blow there.
Yes. She's in rough shape.
How long do you think she'll last?
What do you mean?
Just what I said. Remember, hardness alone won't save you from breaking. If she keeps being shaken up like this, she won't be able to handle it.
But what can we do?
If she breaks, she breaks. Until then, we go on with our mission.
Speaking of being hard.
What? Can't we help her?
If you let sympathy fog your vision, you can end up crashed on a reef.
Even so, we can't just let her suffer. It's too much.
I'm fairly sure that Velvet would say the same thing if she was in Aizen's place.
And do you agree, Rokuro?
Me? I still have a debt to Velvet. I will pay it. But in the end, her fate will be something she'll have to decide for herself.
That's true, but...
Then I have a decision of my own to make. I won't give up on Velvet, no matter what.
I see. Do what you have to.
The boy makes his
We won't
choice.
stop you.
Probably not the choice Magilou is referring to, but he's clearly taken the spirit of her advice to heart already, which I love to see.
Well then, let's move on.
I'm ready for this.
Hey, is everyone all right?
On to battle! I won't improve by fighting weaklings.
You better be ready.
A complete victory!
What level are we at now? I'm curious. 44. Alright. Working our way to end game levels as we work our way to the end game. My goodness. Every time I think we're getting close to the end, this place just folds in on itself. A great way of representing a very different sort of prison right after Titania.
Here I come!
Think you can dodge? Just try. First thing they have.
It appears that we're finished here.
looks like the southern way is the way forward. And we have a little island in this direction, if I'm reading the map right. So, all the better to explore the side route first. Nice! Alright. It's only taken however many hours for Aaron to learn how to read the map in this game, although, of course, we don't need the item that's available. Well, I guess we can burn a couple peach gels on Eisen, and then at least get some value out of the chest. There we go. A classic Tales tech as we work our way through a dungeon.
Always ready to fight.
I am feeling more acutely disappointed than I expected, being without Magilou, as we're dealing with all these spellcasters, knowing she could so easily just suck up all of their spells.
I can't even call that a fight.
Once you get into the habit of that, it really does become a useful technique to turn the tide in some of those battles.
Let's do our best.
So many enemies, oh my goodness. Ooh, that was a good tag team. I don't feel like I understand it well enough to make that switcheroo consistently work that well in terms of the combos that the game wants you to be able to pull off with it, but you can intuit your way into making it work more often than not, I think.
We won, right?
And once you get to that level, it can be pretty satisfying to pull it off. There's that last chest. I knew you were hiding from me somewhere. You can see once you start paying attention, you know Eisen's burst drive is hitting enemies who are down. And so then when that attack just happened with Velvet, that knocked down all the enemies at once. Perfect time to switch to Eisen and just punish them in one fell swoop, literally. Yeah. Of course, we can't actually avail ourselves of that chest, but that's alright. It's nice to know we found it all the same.
Welcome home, Arthur.
Hi, Celica. I fixed the fence around the house.
Oh, thank you, sweetheart. With the brigands stepping up their attacks, the town elders have been worried. But this should put their minds at ease.
No. If the brigands turn into demons, a mere fence won't stop them. Nothing. Don't worry about it. I'm pretty confident in my carpentry. And the other two?
Probably at the Cape again. I've warned them 100 times that it's dangerous.
This is a great case of voice acting calling out different personalities or perspectives and aspects of our life as well, like we were talking about with Velvet a few streams ago when she was returning to a ball and returning to her old speech pattern and things like that. One doesn't really notice, I think, how emotionally subdued Artorias' voice is until one hears how emotionally engaged he is with Celica, and then, my goodness, the difference is stark. You can't unhear it after that.
Laphicet probably badgered Velvet into going. Don't worry, she'll watch out for him.
Yeah, I can only hope that this little one grows up to be as strong as she is one day.
Oh, heartbreaking.
Huh?
You're happy, I hope.
Of course I am. I never thought I could ever be this happy. I only wish I'd known earlier. I would have made something even nicer for you.
You made this for me?
Yeah. I put all my heart into it.
I'll cherish it always. It'll remind me of this happy day.
Let this serve as proof of our love. This I swear. I swear to protect you both with my life.
That's Lord Artorias' past.
Oh my god. She's losing it.
That's rich! You mean you believe that tripe?
It's all a pack of lies. His smile, his promise, everything.
Ugh. I think we're seeing Artorias' past, but my take on the authorial intent behind the representation of those memories right now is I think Innominat knows exactly how Velvet is going to react, and he's using the memories to stoke the two types of malevolence within her that he needs to feed off of in order to be fully realized.
Up his lies without questioning a word. What a joke.
I was thinking too, very interesting for first a Tales game and then secondly a follow-up to Tales of Zestiria to be showing memories of an antagonist's past like this, because think of some of the other examples we've played and spoken about. I mean, you don't get memories of back when Mythos was happy and spending time with Martel. The closest you get to a vision of his past is the vision you get at the very end of Welgaia before you actually breach Vinheim, where you see the memory of Martel being killed, and then you get glimpses of how he felt about her and how he might interact with her when she inhabits Colette's body as the host. But you don't see the happy life that he's mourning, and that's kind of his raison d'etre. Same with Van. You don't see the happy memories of his time with Tyr growing up, or what life was like in Hod before he was compelled to destroy it. And then in something like Zestiria, the predecessor to this, you do get windows of insight into the past of Heldalf, but it's much more like these literary representations of the creation of the Lord of Calamity, and especially through the lens that we get, the interpretive lens of Maven and the way in which he makes meaning out of that for Saray as the shepherd. I at least ended up much more with the feeling that those stories were kind of specifically tailored in order to give Saray and Mikleo an understanding of their place in the lineage and the heritage of the shepherd and the Lord of Calamity, and how their present has come from a particular past and cast of characters in the history of the world. Whereas this really seems to be, as much as I'm talking and speculating about authorial intent with why Innominat might be showing these to Velvet, it does seem, at least in the overall approach and what it is that we're seeing, more of an unvarnished look into the past of how the antagonist was before the fatal wound happened that totally reformulated his character and morphed him into the being that we see throughout the story. Presumably in Artorias' case, though I imagine we'll see it, that wound being the death of Celica and their unborn child.
What we just saw, was that from before the opening?
Yeah. Celica was there, and Artorias still had use of his arm. It didn't look like he was an exorcist either.
I never would have thought Lord Artorias could smile so tenderly.
But he's since become an exorcist, taking on the mantle of shepherd and the weight of the world.
All because he lost his beloved wife.
Although he did say when he met Celica that she was an exorcist. Well, he was going to say, and then he stopped himself. So that doesn't sound quite right.
It's coming.
Oh, I was premature in thinking we'd found our way to the exit in the Earthpulse. Well, I imagine we'll probably get one more memory tying that sequence of Artorias' past together, and more likely than not have to confront that furry, monstrous friend we saw looming in the rafters. This feels like something we should be able to break, but not getting a prompt to do so. Oh, I see. We're gonna have to warp to that side from the warp point over there. Reading maps! It's not for everyone.
Come on, really?
I'll end this quickly.
Hey, is everyone all right? I won't run away.
I feel like I need to remap Velvet's arts at some point. Oh, I'm hitting a swallow dance, which is not my intention. It seems like all roads lead to swallow dance.
I'll cut down anyone in my way!
Ugh. We're too good at health management right now to benefit from any of these health items.
Velvet didn't know those things about Artorias and Celica, did she?
Probably not. That was when the two were alone and first getting to know each other.
We were seeing glimpses of a warm, loving family. But really, it just gave me the creeps.
Same here. I could keenly feel Innominat scheming behind everything we saw.
He's trying to get at Velvet.
That authorial intent we were discussing.
I truly love Lord Artorias. Having that happy past thrust in front of her at a time like this must be tearing her apart.
Probably. But a demon like me wouldn't understand.
What Velvet is going through is horrible. Even as a human, I can scarcely imagine what it must be like. But I approach it, just a little bit, because like her, I was his pupil.
Artorias said he needed 2 types of malevolence to awaken Innominat. The illusions at a ball, making sure we knew about the attack on Titania, and Innominat appearing as her brother. If all of that was planned to extract the malevolence from her.
That's what I was saying.
Brace for worse to come.
Maybe I was just remembering my past playthrough rather than inferring. I feel like I'm usually not that on the nose with my speculations. It's interesting too, thinking about that skit. We spoke a few streams ago at this point about the nature of naming and, for instance, the significance of Laphicet the Malik being renamed Fee versus Laphicet her brother being Laphi and everything like this, which opened up into a conversation about sort of the symbolic value of naming in the Tales series and storytelling, but the Tales series especially more broadly. And I'm thinking now, they haven't quite said this explicitly, but it's certainly in the ether, just the fact that Lord Artorias, in terms of in terms of Velvet's conception of him, is really a different person than Arthur. You have Arthur, this human who was married to her sister, and they were going to have a baby together, and they lived a happy life in this happy town, a ball. And then you have Lord Artorias, this exorcist who has these virtues and principles and maxims, and enacts his will upon the world. So very different personas. It actually reminds me a little of, with spoilers for Tales of Berseria, but we've been talking about it quite a bit on this stream. It reminds me of the distinction between Raven and Captain Schwan, which are just 2 much more clearly demarcated identities that the same guy takes on, between serving as a knight and kind of a tool of the Empire in the game versus initially acting as a member of the guilds on the other side of the world stage, and then eventually kind of enacting his own identity that's separate from the roles that he's been made to occupy by his superiors controlling him. So it's interesting to think that something similar is at work here, but kind of more subtly and maybe not as intentionally by the agent with the different identities. Like, maybe Arthur/Artorias is being deliberate with it. We did see him almost introduce himself as Artorias to Celica and then correct himself and say Arthur. So maybe he was trying to get access to a different kind of life or personality through Celica. But certainly in terms of Velvet's interpretation of him and even the way like various party members think about him, it's interesting that he's so clearly distinguished and schematized into these 2 separate entities. Interesting to think through those dimensions of interpretation of identity as something that might be a through line in this game, because it strikes me as very similar too to exactly what we were talking about in terms of Laphicet the Malik and the effort he had to make to individuate himself, not just as someone who was a person rather than a tool, but also as someone who is distinct from his namesake and Velvet's brother.
Village.
Damn! So many of them! Celica, I'm coming!
It's too late! Take Velvet and Laphicet and run!
I can't do that! I want to have my life with you, with our child.
Again, listen to how emotionally affected his voice is. in comparison with the Artorias we've come to know. Wow.
Why? Why couldn't I? Why couldn't I protect my own family?
Remember this moment well, Artorias. Humans are weak, filled with sin.
Melchior!
The people of this village offered you and your beloved family up to the demon brigands. A sacrifice, so that they could escape and hide.
No, they wouldn't.
It happens often. The reason people act on is burdened by the weight of their sins. However, I have found a method to adjust their reason.
A domain? What is this incredible power? Don't tell me the Empyrean we've been searching for was here this whole time. These Malachim.
So they have been reborn, but be not deceived. They are not the same people you knew.
Wow.
Why must fate be so cruel?
The implication, I guess, being that Fee is in fact the unborn child of Arthur and Celica reborn.
Is incomplete. We must guide him until we understand why. I'll be taking these Malachim.
Wait! I'm sorry I couldn't keep my promise.
Oh my god. This poor broken man.
I'll make things right. I'll abandon who I am. Nameless Moloch. I will forge a pact with you. I will put an end to all the pain in this world.
Do you have it in you? You who abandoned my friend's ideals and fled.
On the souls of my dead master, wife, and child. This I swear.
I don't think we know who his master is at this point.
Artorias Cobrand. I have inherited the will and the strength of Claudin Asgard, former head of the Exorcists.
There you have it. I think we did know that at some point. That came up before.
Very well.
Claudin Asgard.
Let tonight's tragedy change fate and birth salvation.
That Moloch, it was me. You don't remember?
Not at all.
They said you were reborn as a Moloch. That means... what exactly?
The soul of a human who passed away can, given the right trigger, be reborn as a Moloch.
You're saying that Artorias' child was reborn as Laphicet?
If what we saw was
Wow.
real, yes.
Talk about the thematic value of family relations.
So the female Moloch that was born along with him was...
My sister's reincarnation. But I ate her long ago.
You didn't know, right?
No, she
I
did.
knew. I had already caught on to who Ceres really was.
Velvet.
But it doesn't matter. What does it change? I'll devour anything to fulfill my goal. My sister, my brother, even the world. That's who I am. That's all I am.
So they do seem to be made out to be the same yet antithetical, Velvet and Artorias, because if we're to take that birth of Artorias the shepherd at face value, he was basically trying to rectify his own past and the loss of his family by making this pact and claiming a different kind of family at the price of his emotional life, and purely guiding himself by sanitized, emotionless reason and utilitarianism. And Velvet, similarly, is trying to rectify her past loss of her family, but she's doing so by purely tethering herself to the emotionally driven resolve for revenge, and something that I guess is similarly moralized in terms of a kind of punishment for Artorias, in the same way that Artorias is, keeping himself going by thinking that he's seeking a virtuous outcome and purification for the world. So it's like, well, they're on opposite sides of the same coin. The coin is being used as purchase in the same transaction, so to speak.
That was the day all of this started, wasn't it?
Yeah, the opening. Innominat was halfway revived and demons became visible to all.
His power also robbed almost every Moloch of their free will that day.
I never imagined that Lord Artorias' quest to change the world was so steeped in tragedy. The villagers should have never sold them out to those bandits.
It was cruel, yes, but nothing remarkable. People are capable of anything when under pressure, even more so when they can do it under the mantle of the greater good. Velvet's family was probably the furthest outside the village circle that night.
That's pure selfishness.
Humans are selfish creatures. You should be aware of that by now. That's why you said what you said just now, even if you didn't know it. Artorias' quest to change the world, not Artorias' quest to save humanity. I mean no disrespect. It's just an observation.
An incisive one.
Man with the power to change the
Many
world
Tales
is
antagonists want to
potential
change the
humanity.
world.
That may be the biggest tragedy of that night.
The savior of the world lost all hope in its people.
Yeah, that's a familiar theme in many, too many of these games.
I won't improve by fighting weaklings.
Glad we went out of our way for that super useful chest. But at least now we know. And if this game has taught us nothing else, it's that there's value in the knowing in and of itself. I smell a boss fight. Let us out of this Empyrean's body. Please! How's everyone doing? Perfect. Alright. Let's rock.
Eisen, you said a human soul can be reborn as a Moloch given the right trigger, right? Is that something that happens frequently?
I'm afraid I don't have an answer for that. We know that humans are sometimes reborn as Molochim, but not how or why. It's more likely among people with greater resonance, but the process is still a mystery.
Huh. So it's not something that happens, or that can be made to happen easily, ordinarily at least.
But Velvet's sister was reborn as Ceres, and her unborn child came back as Laphicet. What are the chances of that?
It might not have been chance. They both died on the Scarlet Night. Their rebirths may have been influenced by the sacrificial ceremony.
And we also know that the other foregrounded example of a human being reborn as, well, not a Malik, but what we know in Tales of Zestiria as a seraph is Mikleo. And that also happened in the case of a sacrifice where Muse sacrificed him in order to... Oh, was it Muse or Michael? Well, they collectively sacrificed him in order to protect Camlon.
Are you saying that Innominat made it happen on purpose?
No, it was Muse.
Call it an educated guess. But I don't think even an Empyrean can control the lives of humans or Molochim at his whim.
If it wasn't chance, it might have been destiny.
Velvet said she ate Ceres, her own sister reborn as a Moloch. How could such a horrible thing be destiny?
Sorry. I didn't mean to make light of a tragedy, but our fates intertwine. The good and the bad, whether we like it or not. That's what makes it destiny, right?
True. But this...
Get a hold of yourself, Eleanor. Velvet and Laphicet are in rougher waters than any of us. They'll be looking to you to light their way.
Yes. I must remain calm and steady.
It's interesting to me. Like I spoke about in my PAX lecture, I feel like, in general, the Tales series is very anti-fatalistic in terms of characters feeling it's not destiny or some fated journey, but rather on us to make sense of the choices of people in the past and how that's affected the world we see now, and we need to figure out who we are and what we want to make in the world so that we can coordinate our choices for the sake of a better future. So interesting in light of that to see Rokurou be so pointedly fatalistic in terms of thinking about certain world events that might be best explained by destiny. Although I think he might be the exception that proves the rule in terms of just that mere fact in terms of his outlook on the world, saying a lot about his character and the certain strength he draws from his special kind of resolve.
Look! Over there!
An Earthpulse rift. We may be able to get out from there.
Arthur, there's something I'd like to speak to you about. Alone. Two souls possessing powerful resonance and free of malevolence. These must be sacrificed on the Scarlet Night.
Ah, yes. The ceremony to resurrect Innominat. You read my book.
I haven't fully mastered the ancient tongue yet, but I have read your notes. You wrote that if Innominat is resurrected, we can make a world free of demons.
7 years ago, a soul with strong resonance, my own unborn son, was sacrificed for that purpose.
What a detached tone to discuss that with.
Innominat's resurrections have complete.
Because of that, everyone's resonance has grown stronger, enabling them to see demons.
So Celica's soul didn't count.
Yes, that's the truth behind the opening.
So, if one more person is sacrificed...
Innominat's resurrection will be complete, and his power will spur the creation of many new exorcists.
there is another Scarlet Knight very soon. Arthur, I must ask.
Laphicet?
Can't I be the sacrifice?
I knew that's where it was going, man.
Tell me.
But I didn't like
Why
it.
do you think that birds fly?
I think that birds fly because they must. Why else would they have wings if not to embrace the sky? I have wings too, weak as they are. That's why I must fly, now!
It was his choice after all.
If we miss this Scarlet Knight, the next won't be for another 3 years. By then, I won't be alive.
Because of his 12-year sickness.
Laphicet, why would you say such a thing?
The 12-year sickness. That's the name of my disease.
So you know.
I'm not afraid of being sick. But I don't want to just be a burden on everyone until I die. I couldn't take it.
Your wings are your will. And they are strong.
Lars.
Wow.
Please. You can't tell Velvet about this.
I promise.
I'll make a new world. A world where my sister can be happy.
Oh, wow. Chills.
Don't talk to me about will! About wings! Both of you! Together! You betrayed me!
Whoa, hey! What's everyone apologizing for? We're a family, right? Hurry back. I'll make you a quiche.
Wow.
Just the way she taught me. No kidding. I think you'll be an exorcist to
A
rival me.
weaponized montage of memories. Jesus, how about
Go
that?
further than this back at the shrine. I will have my revenge. Revenge for Laphicet! Laphicet knew so much more pain than I ever will. And still, I couldn't do anything for him. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Shut up! It's a lie! A dirty lie! All of it! It's all their lies! And I believed it! Die! 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 Die!
She was the tool all along.
Get out of my way, you disgusting monster!
The reborn Therian, perhaps? That looked like it ran up against a barrier. Unless I just misread that.
An amalgamation of multiple demons? Doesn't matter what it is! I'll devour it until it's dead!
Wow. I'm glad we're gonna have the weekend to unpack and process this before we come back together, but... nuts! The whole idea that, like we were talking about, she had organized her entire existence and reason for persisting in the world around the two pillars of getting revenge on Artorias and getting over her guilt for what had happened to her brother, only for that entire dichotomy to be, I mean, speaking of illusions and themes in the game of illusions with Melchior and everything, like that entire framework according to which she organized her purpose and place in the world was itself an illusion manufactured by Artorias and Laphicet for the sake of their plan to redeem the world. Put that way, if that's to be believed as what really happened, I mean, really even more so than someone like Fee, she kind of is the central object and tool who's been used as an instrument in this story, which is something to think about.
Eleanor, you saved me!
with the extent to which it's almost less of a single manipulation and more of a conspiracy with multiple actors. It's almost like a more sophisticated version and longer con of what happens with Luke and Van in Tales of the Abyss. Which is not a comparison I had on my bingo card, but that has me evaluating this game really differently as we're quickly experiencing so many revelations back to back here. Wow, this fella's a piece of work, by the way. If you couldn't tell. Mamma mia, what level is this guy? Only 48. He feels tanky, but my guess is, what's he called? Yeah, a chimera. Well, that makes sense. I think he's just perfectly engineered to be resistant to all the different things we're trying to whack him with. That Scarlet Edge from Therianization has given us a way to needle its weak point. It seems to be a better outcome than Horizon wailing away with his Earth Arts, only to be resisted time and again. Oh, Jesus! That escalated quickly. Now, because I was ragging on Eisen, the poor dude's not going to work for me at all. Eisen, I'm sorry, man. Please, come through for me. Yeah, I knew that was coming. I think I dodged into that one. There we go. There we go. Ooh, mommy. That was a long fight. Oh!
Is that... I'm dead. I'm dead.
Calm down, Velvet. This farce is just another of Innominat's illusions.
Farce? How callous. That farce is the true face of my sister.
Wow.
She hates, resents, devours, and kills. She tramples people, cities, everything, living only by her emotions. What an ugly, tainted soul.
It's not like that!
Nothing you say will matter. She knows. She knows if it's the truth.
He's right. Just think. Everything I did was baseless, arrogant. And even so, I still...
You hurt so many innocent people, didn't you?
More than I can count. I devoured and killed so many.
Without even knowing Arthur's true aims.
I destroyed people. I destroyed whole towns.
And worse yet, you didn't even show mercy to your own sister's reincarnation.
I hate her.
And despite all of that, I still love you, Velvet. That's why I chose to become a sacrifice. For you, sister. But think, if you tried to stop the resurrection, wouldn't my death be all for nothing? To tell you the truth, I was terrified of dying. It was so dark.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
You'll accept it then? That everything you've done up until this point, all of it.
Yes. It was all for nothing. And for no one. I hurt so many people. All for no reason. I'm a monster.
If you've accepted it, you have to atone for your sins. Once I eat the final two malevolences inside you, I'll fully awaken. Give them to me. Give me your hatred, your despair.
Hatred and despair.
If you do,
That makes sense.
this world of all its pain.
He's like an evil Jesus in this game that's a follow-up to the Christ narrative of Systeria.
In a world without pain and sadness. But you're a monster now. You don't belong there.
Let me go. We have to go.
No!
If you don't, you'll die too for no reason.
No!
A twisted monster like me doesn't deserve to live. Don't you understand?
You're the reincarnation of the first sacrifice. Part of me. Don't worry. I'll devour you too.
Laphicet, tell this self-absorbed idiot what she needs to hear!
Please. Let me go.
Will you stop whining? You don't understand! You snap at people! You're scary! You tried to eat me! But you're also kind! And you're filled with life! I don't understand a single thing about
Fee.
Selfish beneficence.
Or if it was pointless! If the world says it's a mistake to love you, I'll fight the whole world! I don't care how much pain you feel! It doesn't matter! A world without you, Velvet! Is the one thing I couldn't bear!
That's fucking awesome.
Let me go. My hand will...
Eat my arm! I don't care! Just leave me the other one! I needed to clobber the jerk who made my velvet cry!
I love them all. I loved Laphicet, and Celica, Arthur, everyone. To have it all stolen from me. Why them? Why not me? It hurts so much!
Your despair. How is it gone?
Fuck you, man.
A flame burns in my heart, too. A flame I cannot quench no matter how hard I try. Just like you, Velvet.
I finally understand how you felt. But the only one I can fight for is myself.
That's good enough. That's proof that you are truly alive.
Meanwhile, just waiting for us to get back to this poor girl.
Don't worry. If Velvet could do it, there's no way I can't.
How many times do you plan to destroy and rebuild your own heart?
This is retelling also in terms of what I said way at the beginning of the stream in terms of how isolated she is.
Who was it, 108? I lost count. Not that I really care.
Pathetic fool. Did I not tell you it would require an iron will, as indomitable as the very trees that live and die across millennia?
Like you, I suppose. Or that boy over there.
That is the foundation of an ideal world, one free from man's sins.
An ideal world, huh? You, kid. The boy who was your companion, Laphicet. He's alive. Chasing a terrifying demon girl, he has learned the immensity of the seas and weathered the dry wastes of the land. Those people, they're different from us. Despite the pain, the anguish, they embrace the life they've been given. They live, undaunted by the ugliness of the world!
Wow.
So you're doing this all for them? Is that what this is?
Not even close. They aggravate me to my wit's end. Like stabs in the chest, over and over and over. And that's exactly why. That's why I intend to see how all of this ends. I won't be satisfied until I do.
Words bereft of meaning. You truly are my greatest failure.
Gosh, funny just how little I care. No, please!
Awesome.
Let me guess. We came at a good time.
You're late. Because of you, I had to have a conversation.
So, you came face to face with Innominat. If so, then you must know that your quest for revenge is utterly meaningless.
Yeah, I did. I know why sadness fills the world, and I know how deep are the burdens of sin. I tried to abandon my memories of Arthur and Laphi, to cut myself off from it all, and end this tragedy. It's what they would have wanted.
Exactly. You do well to know your place.
But that's exactly why I can't forgive them. Not Artorias, not Innominat. I know my heart is ugly and full of contradictions, but those days we spent together in familial warmth, they're proof that all of us, were truly alive. That's why, no matter how hard, no matter how sad it gets, I will take my vengeance to the very end.
Velvet!
Don't be a fool. Just give up and die like you ought. It is your destiny to wallow in despair.
Now that's more of your typical Tales usage of Destiny.
You take my family, turn me into a monster, and you want
An
my
antagonist
soul
tries to convince you you're supposed to submit to something.
Now who's being the fool?
Our girl's back!
As well. The Lord of Calamity never gives up, not even in the face of death.
Have you no shame for your sins, you unholy monster?
Let me in on this. I lost a bet and I've got some number to work out.
You sure you can fight in your condition?
How do you think I am? Ooh, I thought you'd never ask. I am the dastardly witch Magilou, scourge of self-righteous exorcists. Now face the wrath of Magilou Maven!
Oh, shit. Is she Melchior's daughter? That makes sense. Talk about daddy issues. Also talk about a boss rush. But we're in too deep now. This is Friday night if ever I've known one.
Me neither.
This is our way of saying we trust you. Yeah, you horrible ingrate! See? Stabs in the chest, that's all you give me.
I'll finish this.
Yep. Almost. I have a million thoughts about things we've already talked about in light of everything we're going through right now, but for now I'll just say, in the midst of that last sequence, I remembered why I initially fell in love with this game when it first came out. And it's because the way everything comes together in this third act is just out of this world. Talk about, in a game about emotion, giving the perfect cadence and pacing and build-up and resolution and catharsis to the emotional centerpiece of the whole plot. Ugh. Masterpiece. I would kind of like to see this through with Magilou if we can swing it, because I feel like she owes it to her old man. So that also means, presumably, that Magilou is in the lineage of and ancestor to that Keeper of History Maven who guides Saray in determining his own destiny as the Shepherd, which seems, well, perhaps initially unexpected in terms of how we see Magilou. Pretty true to her character of seeing the truth of this gang's hearts and advocating for them from the sidelines as a kind of emotive observer in the way that the Maven of Zestiria was. I want to absorb this asshole's spells because he deserves it, but I think we missed the window. Yeah, I think Eisen's gonna get him.
Not here! Not now!
Tell Artorias and Innominat. They took something precious from me. I'll never forgive them for that.
The annals of history are stained with evil people like you. You spread havoc and destruction, all to satisfy your own ends. A dark font of malevolence. You're a demon lord, the irredeemable embodiment of sin.
The Lord of Calamity.
It is the Exorcist's duty to destroy you.
You talk a lot. How about you keep talking and tell us where Ifrit is?
I haven't forgotten, man.
You'll regret this.
I can feel Innominat. He's coming.
We can fight here no longer.
Bienfu, close the rift. I can't.
Come forth.
Ah, his demon. Oh, is that Ifrit? That look of recognition from Eisen.
Carelessness will get you killed.
My boy. How did he end up here?
You ruined the moment.
Huh? Don't you mean thanks for saving us, Zavid? You're my hero and role model.
Oh man, I am overwhelmed right now.
Thank you for saving us, Zavid.
Where exactly are we now?
We're in an Abbey facility on Hexenile.
Hexenile! That's what I was saying, the Calyx.
Snuck in. I hadn't expected an extra-dimensional space.
Is there a way out?
There is now that I busted my way in.
Let's head outside. We can talk then.
No wonder Zavid was so knowledgeable about Hexenile when he discovered it was Saray and the gang at the end of Zestiria.
A friend. His name is Number 1.
Hey, wanna come with us? If you stay here alone, a dragon might get you. I bet you wouldn't like that.
Yeah, that sounds scary.
Great. Come on, kid.
Good guy Zavid.
What are you doing?
We can't leave him like this. I'll get him a vessel, somehow.
Do what you like.
Oh my god. What an amazing sequence. Amazing. And in a stream where Dawn of the New World keeps coming up, what a cool echo of the storytelling philosophy of Dawn of the New World, which picked up on so many optional endgame elements of Tales of Symphonia and side content and its EX dungeon for the EX dungeon of Tales of Berseria, the EX dungeon of Tales of Zestiria to end up featuring centrally in the main plot of Berseria as an extra dimensional space. And the way out of the Earthpulse. That's fantastic. Oh my goodness. See, now the gamer in me wants to keep going, but we're already well beyond the promised time of the stream. I want everyone to keep coming along on the adventure with us. So we will wrap things up. Oh my goodness, we'll have so much to break down and think about as we continue to rock through Act 3 on Monday. I loved all of that. I don't know how good the camera is with Aaron at this size on your screen, but I definitely got a little teary-eyed when Laphicet was bullying Velvet back from submission to Innominat, which was fantastic. Talk about emotionally resonant storytelling about emotion. One thing that was really interesting, I mean, there are a million really interesting things about that to talk about, but to just identify a few pieces of food for thought for us to think about over the weekend. I think, there's certainly this interesting sense in which we can ask how truthful or accurate is Velvet being as the game continues to coalesce into its conclusion around the idea that Velvet and her brood are these sinful, self-contradictory creatures. It's another face of what I challenged us to think about quite a while ago as we go through the story in terms of how much, it really is a case of emotion versus reason, or if this party is just acting on different rational principles with a different moral bedrock to them. Because remember, morality and ethics are distinct from the various philosophies that are being espoused by people in this party in terms of their own praxis, and also the Abbey in terms of what it is that they're trying to enforce, even though they hide behind the doctrine of reason and keep attributing emotion to everyone in the party. So that's one question. Notice also, as much as we started by foregrounding all of these family relations and how all of these characters are tethered, and I use that word intentionally, to their family members, what freed Velvet from her broken mind and submission to Innominat was really not giving up her family relations, but relocating her will and sense of agency in what she cares about within herself, in the same way as Laphicet described himself as caring about Velvet for his own sake. Something that's kind of described in the language of Berseria as more of a selfishness or something that might be sinful, but something which is self-directed, I think, again, in a way that resonates with Sorey the Shepherd and his party and their sense of purity from Tales of Zestiria, in this idea of recognizing what is important to you and acting that out in the world in a way that is authentic and free of malevolence. Now, of course, here, on the other hand, we have a party that is owning up to the value and importance of malevolence, so it'll be interesting for us to figure out where the distinctions lie in how that comes to be the case. Here's one way in which we might start to think about that. Remember what I was saying about the importance of distinctions in names and points of identification as also points of interpretation and how we conceptualize others in our lives. And notice that when Velvet was finally standing up to Innominat, she took ownership in a positive way over those memories that she had with Arthur and Laphicet, and she used those names. And then she continued, and that's why I can never forgive Artorias and Innominat, and I'm going to see my revenge through. And she understands conceptually, and this may be where she's coming from in terms of saying that her heart is full of contradictions, and we'll have plenty of opportunity, I'm sure, to come back in the act to thinking about what it meant for poor Magilou to have her heart broken and reassembled in that kind of torture sequence off screen with Melchior over and over again. But we have something similar with Velvet in terms of her talking about the contradictions of her heart, because she recognizes on the one hand that Artorias and Arthur, at the end of the day, are aspects of the same person, and just so with Laphicet and Innominat. But she's also able, in terms of understanding what's important to her now, to take ownership of those aspects of her life and also those relationships that she wants to define her in the way that's meaningful to her, including the pain and the loss that have come with them, and also antagonize those aspects of those people that caused her suffering. So kind of recognizing the love and hate in a relationship on a par with each other, and saying, yeah, it might not make sense. It might not be a consistent relationship and something that is logically comprehensible in terms of how I stand in relation to Arthur and Laphicet, but at the same time, by the same token, I love and hate these people because of the roles they've had in my life, the various roles that they've had in my life. And so perhaps part of the puzzle that she is now trying to work her way out of is that, speaking of the many prisons she's been through, one of the biggest ones has been this game, basically, that, I mean, a high stakes game, but a game that Arthur and Laphicet, it turns out, played with her in terms of setting her up, in terms of the way that she would perceive Laphicet's sacrifice, to have this false conception of what really happened with Arthur and Laphicet, and to determine her course in life based on those false understandings of those relationships. And the way out of that is not to forgive or to process in a healthy way necessarily that manipulation, but to recognize that exactly what caused that to happen is also what's true of Velvet's nature, namely the fact that people are flawed and complicated and sometimes might want to do the wrong thing for the right reasons, or the right thing for the wrong reasons. And that's the tension that is malevolence, exactly, that dissonance between what people recognize as the right thing and what they actually do. And it's also that kind of dissonance, Velvet's insight seems perhaps to be, that allows us to recognize our positive and negative feelings towards people, because if people are contradictory, so too can our feelings be towards them. And the embrace of that actually leads to something that is healthier, more holistic, and human than trying to simply flatten and nullify certain aspects of our feelings in the service of consistency. Maybe that's a better way to think of it, the idea of consistency versus contradictory modes of engagement with the world rather than reason versus emotion. That might be a paradigm for us to play around with as we come back on Monday and dig into the rest of this act. But man, talk about something that is emotional, no matter how we want to cash out the thematic and intellectual content of the story. The fact that Innominat and Artorias' plan was so carefully architected, yet predicated upon Velvet having these one-dimensional relationships with people, because it's that one-dimensional aspect of how she feels towards them that makes it so easy for them to play with her expectations and subvert what she thinks is happening in order to bring out this pain and suffering and these particular sins in her for the sake of Innominat's revival. But as soon as she steps outside of that paradigm and accepts these sorts of dialethic or mutually contradictory truths about how she feels about people, then that kind of manipulation just is no longer a form of life in which she engages, and it has no power over her. So Laphicet giving her that gift of a new way to think about those relationships is exactly what lets her out of that prison, I think. What a cool arc to go through. I know we went over time. I think that was absolutely worth it. So great to see Velvet buried in despair and hatred, only to find a way out of it without letting go of those negative emotions, but also finding an inspiring path forward. And so cool that tension could be something that brings us so close to Sorey in some ways, yet is totally opposed to him in other ways. Perhaps another sort of healthy contradiction, but on the level of between the games. Perhaps proving Tales of Berseria's point. But of course, we're only just now finding our way through the third act. Its point, in many ways, remains to be seen, and I am excited to see that with you. Thank you for joining me on this Friday adventure through a longer stream. Wow, we covered a lot of ground between this amazing arc in Berseria. So glad to see it from beginning to end. And to be able to talk about the new Tales of Arise DLC. I know I'll have so much more to talk about, but hopefully it's evident by now. My mind is already percolating with far too many ideas. And the great thing about content like this, with a series like Tales, is you can speculate 8 ways to Sunday, what it's going to be about, what's going to happen in it. You'll probably get most of it wrong, but you'll get plenty more valuable insights about the series, what it's saying, and your relationship with it just by virtue of that speculation. And whatever ends up being the textual content of that new DLC will be groundbreaking and thoughtful and worth experiencing and thinking about on its own terms as well. So can't wait to see where Bandai Namco goes with that. I'm out of coffee now, but it's probably bad luck to toast with an empty glass, but I will toast you again anyway. Bandai Namco, you've earned it tonight. Thank you everyone for hanging out. It's been a pleasure as always. I'm Aaron Suduko, your host of Tales of Praxis. I will be living inside of other Tales games, not only thinking about Tales of Berseria, but also working through my analysis on Vesperia and Destiny this weekend. So really hopeful to share something with you this coming week. I hope you like the finished product and its insights. Hope you find it valuable. Have a feeling you will. Have a feeling we'll have a lot to talk about. But until then, same time on Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern. Think well, game well. Let me know what you played this weekend on Monday, and we'll get back into the heart, emotional, rational, and otherwise of Tales of Berseria on Monday. Until then, my friends, have a good night.